is, okay.
On record.
Good evening. Welcome to the City of Lincoln City Council meeting for Monday, May 14th, 2018. It's a little bit after 6 p.m. If you wish to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item, please sign up on the sheet near the entrance door to the council's chambers. You'll be called to speak during the public comment section. Comments or testimony on agenda items listed under public hearing, public comment will be taken at that time. Roll call, please.
Don Williams.
Here.
Dick Anderson.
Yes.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
Deanna Hinton.
Here.
Judy Casper.
Here.
Susan Walke.
Here.
And that's all.
Would you please all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Apicello, we're going to recess to executive session meeting. Could you read the script for us?
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
Just a question while he's looking that up. Was the presenters and people that are scheduled informed that there'd be some time gap before their...
We had discussed that briefly, and then I was just told take it back again. So, Ron, explain what's going on.
If you look at your agenda, please note that we put the executive session before all of the other items that are under the special portion of the meeting. Hang on, let me see here. If you wanted to delay the executive session, then the time to put it would be at item K. And as a matter of fact, yeah.
And that's fine with me.
You could even, as a matter of fact, you could even take care of items 14, K, 14, 15, and 16, and then go into the executive sessions. But items K, 12, and K, 13 are those that need to wait until after the executive session.
That work for
Mr. Mayor, I would prefer that, just
I would
simply...
too, but that's what we had here, I
yeah.
thought. Okay.
If that's all right with the rest of the council?
Council, okay?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so we're going to do that. Just so everyone's clear, we're going to move executive session, which was D. We're going to move it back to bottom of K. We'll do 14, 15, and 16, correct? Then go to executive session, come back and report on 12 and 13?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll do that then.
So that's unanimous consent then?
That looked pretty unanimous to me. All right. Lady needs water. Okay, can we send someone for that?
It's on its way.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question about the consent agenda. Do we need to remove item 1 since it's a vote on money?
Yes, please.
I would like to remove number 1 from the consent agenda.
Because it's,
It needs a voice vote, not a consent vote.
oh, thank you. Okay, so since we are at the consent agenda part, the commercial design standards, regular minutes of work session September 5, 2017, 2:30, regular meeting minutes of work session January 29, 2018, 5:30, regular meeting minutes of work session March 5, 2018, 5:30, regular meeting minutes of work session March 5, 2018, 6:30, and regular meeting minutes of regular meeting April 23, 2018. We have request to pull number 1. Anyone else?
I move to approve consent agenda items 2 through 6.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. And we've, don't need a motion on 1, or, no? Yeah.
You need a vote on.
Yeah, okay, let's have a motion on 1.
Roll call vote.
I move to approve the commercial design standards contract with MIG.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion?
And, Mr. Mayor, it wasn't clear to me, in reading through the memorandum or staff notice that it came through planning, but I couldn't see that planning approved this. So is it just coming to us?
Planning or Planning Commission?
I mean, Planning Commission.
I'm going to ask Deborah to come and address.
Actually, this is a contract, and under the contract delegation, you've delegated to the city manager the ability to do personal services contract up to 50,000. This exceeds his authority, which is why it's before you.
And I understand that. I'm looking because it got referred to Planning Commission. And so did Planning Commission take any action on it or even
This
review
isn't
it?
just a contract decision. The standards will have to go to the Planning Commission as they are land development regulations. But the
Deborah.
contract to hire the planner to come up with the standards is a
Didn't
public
come.
contracting decision.
So I read that wrong, then. It didn't come
It didn't go to the Planning Commission.
Commission.
No,
Okay,
Counselor,
that's
it has
fine.
not been to the Planning Commission meeting.
That, I must have read it wrong. The other, then, also in the staff, sorry, Deborah, but I think in the last paragraph, the percentages didn't add up to 100. And so I was wondering who was responsible for the last 14%. And I think I figured out that it's planning staff or the city staff.
It's 6 and 8, you're right, that does not add up. 40% is Mapanji, 36% is John, and the other planner,
Eight.
Alex, and then we have Scott Siegel. That's a good question, Dick.
But then 8%, I see that, so we're up, but is it staff?
We are going to be participating.
So that
and
must be,
Could be. No, I don't know, I took this out of their proposal
and
that
that's
they
fine.
made, and, I must have just
Is
grabbed
that
the wrong number.
Is that a percentage of the total dollar value? Because then there's materials and time and.
Oh, that could be its percentage of the budget,
It's
not
work
of
complete.
the staff time involved.
Amount of work. So that when I read
Sorry,
it on,
that
I
is
wondered if it
confusing.
was.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, the other thing I had in here, at first, it looked very narrowing, that as I read it, it sounded like we were contracting just for those areas of the city that don't already have some commercial design standards.
Well, we want them to take a look at what we already have as well.
Good. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear, that this
Okay.
goes beyond those.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
then I'm good.
Okay.
I have a question concerning online updates. The city will host and update a project landing page, blah, blah, blah. Outcomes from Imagine Lincoln City have indicated that many interested community members get their local news from NewsGuard and News Lincoln County. We suggest promoting our online outreach opportunities through these resources to expand the reach of this project. Are you saying to the exclusion of anyone else?
We will send our advertisements out or our notices out as we always do.
So the News Times will be involved in this? And
Sure.
It just
I'll
sounds very
make a special
exclusive.
note of that if that's
Okay, it just sounds
if that's
exclusionary, and I don't want
of
to see that.
concern. Sure.
We're not giving exclusives, and so it's just get the normal dissemination.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I'd move to approve commercial design standards and contract with MIG.
I think we
Yeah, we already had that.
Oh,
You were-
sorry,
you were
we're in discussion. Sorry to
Further
butt.
discussion? Roll call, please.
Hinton,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
And Hoagland.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much. And thanks for getting this rolling. This is, I'm looking forward to this. There will be no golf clapping here.
Just was excited.
Okay. No council deliberations. Comments from citizens present on agenda, non-agenda items. I don't have anyone signed up. Was there anyone who did not sign up, wish to speak, or I don't have the list in front of me? I'm not seeing any hands, so. Nobody? Okay, we're rolling on then. Presentations, National Emergency Medical Services, EMS Week, May 20th through 26th, 2016. And I don't know who's. Well, it says 2016, so that's what we're doing, so you better have the old stuff here. 2018, yeah, come on forward, please. How did you not see it?
Oh, I will say that they kind of messed up the plaque, but it's
Look at the
beautiful.
agenda.
Hi, my name is Monica Valencia. I'm with Pacific West Ambulance, Marketing and Community Relations Manager for Lincoln County.
And yes, I'm here each year to present you with a plaque, and also to mention that it is, yes, EMS Week, 20th through 26th, 2018. I also want to mention, of course, because it is our lifeguard enrollment, we do not prorate, so I always mention that May and June is our lifeguard enrollment time. And so for those folks that need that bill alleviated or that peace of mind, it's something to definitely invest $59 in. So, but really, other than that, you know, it's next on the 20th, 26th, saying hello to your fellow EMS partners. We have fire, police, ambulance, paramedics, EMTs. They will appreciate that acknowledgement.
We appreciate them, most assuredly.
Yes. Thank you. I'll let them know. And I'm just here to present you with this. And they did make a mistake. It's actually EMS Strong, Stronger Together. Yes. But it's beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, could we have Monica, could you sit back down and then go to the mic?
While she's seating herself, I'll read. Pacific West Ambulance recognizing the City of Lincoln City for its continued support of emergency medical services personnel in the City of Lincoln City. So thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Monica?
so my question,
Yes.
so we seem to get a plaque every year.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that, I
Yes.
think. But I've never been able to get a good answer to the question of, what do we do? I mean, the ambulance service is a paid by user operation, so the user pays.
Yes, but you guys do acknowledge, and it does get public, that you announce the EMS week to the public, so we are thankful for that.
Okay, so you're using our marketing arm, is that it?
I think that we're just we're not using anything, we're just benefiting
Right.
as an actual EMS partner in our community to announce and get folks to acknowledge the EMS world and say thank you for what you do.
Okay. I hate to be fussy, but
Please be.
I would encourage you, me personally, so this is just me, we don't need a plaque.
It's actually requested from me, and this is the only city that requests a plaque from me, actually, every year.
I don't know who requests it.
Reporter, or the city reporter requests a plaque from me. Kathy, you want to help me out here?
Monica calls every year
Yeah.
because she wants to do the EMS week, and we have told her that she couldn't do the proclamation because we don't do proclamations anymore. And we were doing the plaque, so it was just kind of offered, do you want to do the plaque or the proclamation? We don't do the proclamation, so she thought she would do the plaque for us.
I'm happy to not do a plaque, though.
I'm
Just
most,
saying.
Mr. Mayor, I'm most appreciative for the attention, but I've always tried to figure out, and this isn't the first year, I mean, we got plaques.
No, it's a good question.
Galore.
But that is what we're
But-
just answering. That's true.
But I
So
think-
absolutely.
The idea is, we don't mind you coming, and again, I don't mean to speak for council, but I don't mind you coming and using 5 minutes or whatever, and use our marketing tool, which there's an audience that actually watches these meetings, for you to share information about services and EMTs and everything else. And that's great. I'm not sure what happens to proclamations. That's why I'm not big on proclamations, because I never see one in the newspaper. I don't see one anywhere. And so it's really just, please come, use the opportunity to say what you're doing for me, but I don't need a plaque.
Do you use them in a press release if we do a proclamation? Does that
Absolutely. We, and Jeremy
Where?
as well. There's been Rick Beasley. They attend the proclamation.
Is that important to you?
It's not important to me personally, because I represent such a great staff when it comes to our paramedics, EMTs, billers. So yes, it means a lot to them.
Okay. Well, I think we have adopted proclamations by consent if we want to, so.
Well, I think, yeah, ones, if they come and present, a lot of them used to just send or request a blank. And
We've shot that down.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that's requested from us
you don't
typically,
have to
but I'm
bring a
happy to
plaque
say a
anymore.
proclamation.
right? No more plaques.
Sure, I'm good with that. You're the only one, so that'll be okay with me.
Oh, the
Thank
poor plaque maker.
No.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
I
Mike.
appreciate it very
Thanks for
much.
being here.
All right. And again, thank you to all those who do serve and serve us so well in those times of need. Tsunami Resilience Land Use Planning Project, 2018. I cannot believe I just straight out just read 2016.
That's what it says.
I know, but it's I'm in front of the monkey and tell me what he's supposed to do.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. With me tonight is Meg Reed, who's going to give a presentation on Tsunami Resilience Project. Meg is Coastal Shores Specialist in the Department of Land Conservation and Development's Ocean and Coastal Services Division. And we have, with her assistance, we've been authorized to get a grant from Department of Land Conservation and Development in the amount of $14,000 to help with tsunami resilience planning. And she has a presentation to give on that. And what we're asking tonight is for your authorization to direct us to proceed with the implementation of the project, and as she will explain it in the presentation.
Thanks, Richard. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Again, I'm Meg Reed. I'm the Coastal Shore Specialist with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this project that we're doing not only in Lincoln City, but up and down the Oregon coast. The funding comes from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We received 2 federally competitive grants last year and this year to do this work up and down the coast. And broadly, it's about tsunami resilience through land use planning. And it's also in partnership with the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, or DOGAMI as they're commonly known. And so I'll be explaining what the funding is going towards and what it will look like for Lincoln City potentially. So we have a few cities. There are about, I think, 12 or 13 that we're working with. So you can see them pictured here on the map, and Lincoln City is one of them. So we've started this project in September of 2017, and we'll be continuing for the next year and a half and potentially longer as more communities get on board. So there are 2 key components to this project, and the first that we'll be starting now with Lincoln City and have started with other communities is land use planning measures to address tsunami hazards, and I'll talk more about that. And then the second piece of it is called Beat the Wave modeling, and again, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's likely to occur this fall for Lincoln City, and that is the role that DOGAMI plays in this. And I just want to mention that this project really focuses on life safety, and we know that there's a lot of development already has occurred in the tsunami inundation zone. A lot of this happened before we even knew that this hazard existed, and so we're not necessarily trying to change anything in that regard, but really just focus on getting people out of harm's way as quickly as possible and making sure that the really important essential services like hospitals and schools and police stations and things like that are out of harm's way and are able to take care of our communities once the event has happened. So I just wanted to give a little refresher on some of the resources that are already out there that you're probably familiar with. So if you have never been to OregonTsunami.org, I encourage you to check it out. It's really the one-stop shop for all of the data products that are out there already on tsunamis specific to Oregon. And so this is the evacuation brochure, which I'm sure you've seen already. And so this shows a couple of different things. One is the worst case distant tsunami, so that's something that would come from somewhere else, like Alaska being our closest area that could send a tsunami our way. And in that case, we have a lot of time ahead of time to evacuate because we'll know it will happen in advance. And then the yellow area is the worst case scenario for a local Cascadia earthquake and tsunami So that's where we wouldn't have any other warning other than the earthquake itself, and then only about 15 to 25 minutes before the first tsunami wave arrives to get to high ground. And the high ground in this case is all colored in green. So that's the area above the tsunami. And again, this is the worst case scenario. This isn't just another version of that, so you can actually see it online in an evacuation viewer, and so you can type in any address and you'll be able to see in a more specific way, which might be more helpful than the evacuation brochures. And then this you might not be as familiar with, but these are the tsunami inundation maps that also were produced at the same time as the evacuation brochures, and this shows the small through extra large scenarios. So this is based on the magnitude earthquake and how far inland it would come in. So you can see the dark purple is small, and then medium is the lighter purple, and so on up through extra large, which is the worst case scenario with the biggest wave. So I just show this to kind of show that there is some nuance to it. There are these areas, distinct areas, and this is important in terms of land use planning if you're thinking about regulations, because these kinds of questions kind of come up. You can think about what's our acceptable level of risk when it comes to various levels of development. And so using these maps, you can really see the different zones and the different levels of risk. And this is just another close-up of that in a different part of town. So you can see, I mean, in this part of town, the small, it basically just comes up to the beach. So it doesn't really inundate very far. But then you can start to see it coming in at 34th Street with the medium event and so on up until extra large. So again, it's just an important tool to be able to look at the different levels of risk. So this is the new product that's out there we call Beat the Wave, and this is an example from Rockaway Beach. They already have a published report with these results, but this is what you can expect to see for Lincoln City. So this shows from every point in a community how fast and in what direction you have to move to get to high ground before the first wave arrives. And it's color-coded based on walking speed. So Dogami has really great information. We actually know at every point along the entire coast, based on the model, what time the first tsunami wave arrives. And so that's really helpful. And then we can use things from exercise science and other land cover values, like if you're traveling over a paved road versus loose sand versus a gravel road, that affects how fast you can move when you're walking. And so those are things that are taken into account in the model. So the one that's on the left shows what we call bridges intact. So this is, again, in northern Rockaway Beach. And you can see it's slow walk, and fast walk. The dark orange is fast walk. And so that's about the speed that people have to travel to get to the green area, which is outside the inundation area. But on the right, we can do hypothetical scenarios. So in this case, both the bridges in the very northern part are non-retrofitted bridges, which means that they're likely to fail in an earthquake and they won't be passable. So we force people to go around those in this modeling scenario. And you can see those colors change. And the pink is a slow jog, the purple is a run, and the blue is a sprint. And even the most able-bodied people are not able to maintain a sprint for very long. So this is a really nice visual way to really start to understand vulnerabilities in a community for evacuation purposes. And then you can really start to play with the model, and you can see, and I don't show it on this figure, but the 12th Avenue Bridge, which is the second bridge, actually turns out to be more important than the top one. And so if you had funding available, you would want to use it for the one that has the most bang for your buck. We know that there's limited resources to go around for things like this. And so this model helps to give you the data to back up decisions to make a tsunami evacuation improvements. You can also do this with a pedestrian trail or hardening a trail, doing a hypothetical vertical evacuation structure and playing where would be the best place to put it. So there's lots of things that you can do with this. The other scenario that I wanted to show and point out is landslide potential. So it's sort of a first look at how landslides might affect assembly areas. So, you know, getting to the green, getting to high ground could be a challenge in certain places because they're really steep slopes and they might be prone to landslide. And so we can look at that in the modeling at a first level basis. And so again, you can see on the right-hand side, those hatched areas are areas that are high ground but are likely to landslide. And so again, this is a tool that helps you to see those potential challenges and give people another option to go or do some mitigation to help with those landslides. And in some cases, landslides are not necessarily going to prevent evacuation, you just have to scramble over them. So that's kind of the beat the wave data. In addition to that, we also are going to provide a socio-economic analysis. And so this can help show numbers of people, businesses, and critical facilities that are in the inundation zone for different scenarios. So we do you already have numbers for the large. There's a publication that exists for that. But we'll also do medium and extra, extra large. So you can see the differences between those scenarios. And then we do types of population groups that are living in the tsunami inundation zone. So for example, child care centers would be a place where you'd want to take a look at it and make sure that they have easy evacuation routes. And then we also do sort of an economic rough estimate of damage to buildings and businesses and how that might impact the community. So there's a couple of different pieces of information that you'll get because of this project. And this is just an example of some of the data that already exists. So 16% of the Lincoln City residents are in the large tsunami inundation zone. So what can you do with this data? I've talked about a couple of things already, but these are some pictures from up and down the Oregon coast of what people are doing. So in Cannon Beach, they're doing a sign every 50 feet so that people know where they're going and how to get to high ground. There are blue line projects that you can get funding from the Oregon Office of Emergency Management, where it paints on the line where extra, extra large meets high ground so that people get used to seeing it every day and becomes part of their everyday life. And then the top pictures are from Safe Haven Hill, which is in Newport. They did some trail evacuation improvements, and then they do community-wide evacuation drills twice a year. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the land use side of things. So moving on past just getting data, what can you do with it from a land use perspective? And so the things that our department recommends doing are we have some comprehensive plan policy text and map amendment language. And then we have a tsunami hazard overlay zone, model code, and I'll talk more about that. And then the last thing is the tsunami evacuation facilities improvement plan. And then we have some resources to help guide you through this process, which it includes, and this is our best resource, is Preparing for a Cascadia Subduction Zone Tsunami. It's a land use guide that our department put out in April of 2015, and it really is a step-by-step tool to help communities think about this hazard and start to do some potential land use regulations around it. We have local and state staff that can help with this. And then, of course, as Richard mentioned, we're giving a technical assistance grant for $14,000, which requires a one-to-one match. So it's a total of $28,000, but that can be in kind. It doesn't have to be cash. And then we have other hazards and projects. You probably know that there's a lot of momentum and projects and funding going into natural hazard mitigation up and down the coast and all around Oregon. So Lincoln County just did a multi-jurisdictional natural hazard mitigation plan this past fall. It got, or I think in 2015 maybe. Anyway, each city has a piece of that in that natural hazard mitigation plan, and it's a requirement to have access to FEMA funding. So if you want to be able to apply for those funds, you have to have this plan, and it has to be updated every 5 years. And within your plan, you have lots of items that this project can help address with doing tsunami mitigation work, both for evacuation and for land use. So we can help you further those action items, and that really looks good for FEMA, and, especially if you want to get some of their funding. So just to talk a little bit more about the tsunami hazard overlay zone, it's a lot like a flood hazard overlay zone in concept. So it's a spatial type of regulation where you would use the tsunami inundation maps that already exist as a boundary to attach regulations to. So again, want to emphasize this applies to new development and redevelopment, so nothing that's already out there. And then it does not apply to single family dwellings. So we provide a model code, but it's a model, so it's meant to be designed to each community to fit everyone's needs. But there are three main things that it focuses on. One is to limit certain uses, so that would be things that I already mentioned, like hospitals, schools, police and fire stations, not putting them in the tsunami inundation zone, or at least to a certain level. So again, you can pick small, medium, large, extra large, and so on. And then for other types of new development, things that have more density, like a hotel or a subdivision, you might require evacuation improvements as part of the overall development design. So you're not preventing it from occurring, but just making sure that they have evacuation in mind when they do the development. So that could be signage, could be adding a new pedestrian pathway to connect existing roads, things like that. And then flexible development options, so that would be potentially if the overall design of the development was to help be more resilient to a tsunami, then you might be more flexible on other code things like density, setback requirements, and things like that. But again, it's a model code to start with, and then you can tailor it from there. The last thing is the Tsunami Evacuation Facilities Improvement Plan. And so it's kind of like a facilities improvement plan, but specific to tsunami evacuation. So it's meant to be a comprehensive look at what exists out there already. And so Beat the Wave really helps with this. It shows you your road network, your trail network, what are your current vulnerabilities, and then helps identify projects that might help to mitigate for those. And it doesn't mean that they all have to be done right away or overnight. It's just a long-term planning tool that when funding opportunities present themselves, you can jump on them really quickly because you already have this information identified. And the Beat the Wave modeling can help to justify why you think that improvement needs to be made. So just to give you an example of what that could look like, again, using City of Newport as an example, they have a spot on the south side of the 101 bridge called Safe Haven Hill, and that's really the only place to evacuate for all of the people who are in the South Beach community. And they were able to get a FEMA grant to improve their trail system up onto the hill. So they have access ways on 3 sides of the hill now, one of which is ADA accessible. And they were able to clear some brush and trees at the top, and then they put a Connex box there for cash, community cash. And so they used FEMA funding to do that, but they have to provide a match, and so they used urban renewal funds to match the FEMA funding. It's a 25% match to a 75% funding from FEMA. So they were able to do that and do some improvements, and now the community is stocking the cash and coming up with a plan for maintaining it over time. So that's an example of what could be done. Usually we suggest each city have a project management team, and in this case I think we're asking the Planning Commission to be that. And so they would help to guide the overall project, participate in the Beat the Wave mapping to make sure it all meets expert knowledge, local knowledge, and then to shape the land use regulations and provisions before they come to the City Council. So the projected timeline, as I mentioned before, we can start land use planning now. So start looking at those model codes and see what you like and what you don't like. Then the Beat the Wave analysis will happen in the fall. They're doing some other communities, so it's just a little bit down the queue. And then community engagement to get input on how people feel about these new regulations, and the potential for evacuation improvements would be throughout the project as you would like. So that's it, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Hi, Meg. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have 2 questions. One is, could we maybe get a copy of your presentation? So, as we've just zipped right through that, and this is one of my favorite subjects. My question is this. In dealing with the other cities along the Oregon coast, have you been in contact with any of them who have a willing seller program for particularly vulnerable areas? Or have you had conversations about that idea?
Do you mean like someone to buy out properties, like individual homeowners?
Well, I'm just thinking, yeah, homeowners or businesses or whatever, who you mentioned like daycare for kids or something. If there happened to be a property owner who that was their sole purpose, then a willing seller program there would be funding somehow provided to buy that out, and then that property then would not be used to be built on, or maybe built into a park or
Yeah.
some other use.
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of that necessarily. A few things come to mind that are similar. So Waldport, they moved their high school to high ground, and they used FEMA funding to do that. And then the land that was vacated is deed restricted, so they have to have FEMA approval on anything that happens on that, and it's likely just to be a public park. So that's maybe a potential avenue for funding that kind of concept. A buyout kind of idea would be FEMA. They do that already for repetitive flood losses. I haven't seen it as often for tsunami, but it's worth a try. But there's possibly other ways of doing that too, and I think if that's of interest, it would be worth exploring for sure. But there haven't been as many just general like neighborhoods kind of scale yet that I've come across. But we're sort of learning as we go, and so I think that's
Well, if you hear of something, let us know.
yeah. Thanks for that.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Has there been any thought about educating like some of our visitors via our local TV stations to have information like this? We have a channel for public access. Would that be helpful to them to know where to go and if they happen to be cruising through on the remote?
Yeah, well, so there are lots of pieces to overall preparedness for this disaster, and land use planning is one of many, and we're not necessarily really great at the personal preparedness level, but the Office for Emergency Management, that's one of their mandates, is to do that kind of education for people up and down the coast. And so I think they would probably be very willing to do something like that on public access channels and could provide information for that. And I would be happy to make that introduction. We just don't, I mean, we could certainly post this information and other information that's already out there. I'm happy to do that, but they might have better messages for individuals who want to know their evacuation routes and how to prepare. So yeah, we can definitely make that connection.
I think an app would be a great place for information like that. Don't you, Ron?
It's proposed in the budget.
I did have a question. So this is all just concerned with the land use side and how to get not necessarily dissemination of information, but where to go once this happens and how we're going to plan for that. The component I'm not getting is how do we get that information to people? We can talk about, okay, you need to go here, but at 1 in the morning, how do we get a hold of everybody? And this seems just kind of fruitless if we don't tie that information together, because my phone's on vibrate at 1 in the morning and I don't hear it, and I don't have a landline, and I don't, how many more tsunami sirens do we have but the one? And I don't expect the police to run down to the tsunami zone to find people. I expect them to go to the high ground to save the people to get out. And
well, so for a local event, the only warning you'll get is the earthquake itself. So the message that people should understand is that nobody's coming to help you evacuate. So if you feel significant shaking for a long period of time, you need to get yourself out to, if you're in an inundation zone, up to high ground. In a distant tsunami event, you have potentially 4 or more hours before the tsunami wave arrives, and my understanding is, each jurisdiction probably does that in a different way, and when it happened in, I think, 2011 with the Japan tsunami that did come to Oregon, police went down to the beach and got people off the beach. They went around the streets with a siren that just said, there's a tsunami that's coming in, however many hours you need to stay away from the beach. For a distant event, the inundation area is much smaller, usually limited to just the beaches and lakes, and maybe shorelines close to the ocean. But you'll have a lot of time to get that message out, and all of our emergency managers up and down the coast are trained on that, and they have plans of how to do that. But for a local event, there will be you won't get anything on your cell phone. The cell phone towers likely won't be working.
And forgive my analogy if it's really weak, but when I board an airplane, there are people who say, yeah, I'll be by the emergency door, or I won't be by the emergency door. And do we have something like that that says, hey, would you like to be a volunteer in this chain to, necessarily a ward of your district or whatever, just to say, I'll be a point person, and I'll make sure that I have my phone on all the time and the like. It just, again, it seems to me the communication part is where this is going to break down.
So I don't know if I can answer that
You don't
fully,
have to.
because it's not, yeah, we are doing long-term planning. That's
Sure, I
our-
understand. I just, these things pop into my head, so
But I think, I mean, I don't know if Mark is still here.
it doesn't need an answer tonight.
Yeah, so they're probably your best bet, and the Jenny Damaris is the emergency manager, and
Yeah,
she does a
absolutely.
lot of work, and so I would rely on them for that information. Sorry.
Lie. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
I guess all I would like to bring back to what I thought the topic was, and it's land use, not necessarily in the emergency, but
Right, beforehand.
yeah. So I think the council needs to recognize what the output will be. It's not more sirens or flags or flashing lights. It's moving people or anticipating the use of land, right?
Right,
Either
yes.
now and perhaps after too, but
Right, and then that's, I acknowledge that, but it doesn't do any good to do this if we don't tell them
well,
how to,
I would disagree with you because by doing this, you move the schools out of an area that would be flooded or tsunami. And you don't allow a hotel, for example.
yeah, absolutely.
But that's why it's land use. So that's all I'm trying to make the point of. So we're not having the expectation of rescue or.
I can add also, one of the really neat things from this is that beat the wave analysis, which people can use to say, you know, how much time do I have, where do I want to be, and the city can use, as Mick mentioned, for things like what infrastructure do we want to focus on to make sure that the paths to vacate are available. So.
Mr. Mayor. Please. So have we done that like Cannon Beach? Has that overlay happened with the go with the flow or beat the wave? Has that happened for Lincoln City?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's coming.
Okay.
So our grant is going to pay for it, and it will probably be in the fall.
Cool. And then from that, could we adjust maybe higher congestion areas or more red areas to try to facilitate moving people? Will we use that map as a tool to see that, or is it just going to be that's how it is at that time?
I think one of the main purposes of the Beat the Wave map is to figure out where we want to put resources.
Okay.
Or like to retrofit a bridge if
Sure.
it's important.
Sure.
Another piece of this is the Tsunami Evacuation Facility Improvement Plan. And we'll look at what facilities we need and where, and then what can be done, particularly for a place like Cutler City, where it's a long distance to get to high ground. Is it possible that we can come up with an alternative, such as vertical evacuation? And it may not be possible there, depending on the soil and that kind of thing. But this is something that we can look at through this process.
How much are we completed with those leaving the tsunami zone? And are we going to put those on the highway, like those heat ones? Or?
We've put a bunch of them out already.
Yeah. What percentage are we done with that? And will we be putting those on the highway?
I can speak just to the Highway 101 at least. So ODOT and Dogami are partnering to do all of 101 by the end of maybe a year from now. They've already finished Clatsop and Tillamook, and they're working on Lincoln County this summer. So that's just for 101. The other streets obviously are up to each jurisdiction.
There are roadside signs that they've put up in various places.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I mean, they're really durable, it looks like, and it's, nice and bright. And
Just within.
Mark, you got to come up and introduce yourself, speaking to the mic. Sorry.
Within Lincoln City, we are pretty much complete for the moment. We've installed about 30. We left a few on the side because there's some roads that are being resurfaced and we can't get to them right away. And eventually, through this process, we will have we'll have a template. We'll be able to do our own, essentially spray paint our own sort of things rather than these heat sealed things because they're
this
a lot
is
more
from
expensive.
a grant. Yeah.
Mark, could you introduce yourself so people know who you are?
My name is Mark Nicholson. I'm the it's a hard angle, emergency preparedness coordinator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Anyone else? Good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion that we appoint the Planning Commission as the Project Advisory Committee and direct staff to start work on this tsunami Resilience Land Use Planning Project.
Second.
Motion second, discussion? Hearing,
Just one little thing.
please.
This is very exciting, and thank you very much. And hopefully we can see some results from all this planning, zoning planning effort soon. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't hear any of it, so that's why I asked what. Okay. All right. Public comment and resolution, North Lincoln Sanitary no. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Lincoln City Cultural Center Annual Update. I circled it and skipped right over it.
Ms. Robertson?
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I just want to provide a little background. The Urban Renewal Agency has been a supporter of the city and community vision for the Lincoln City Cultural Center, which began as the 4 Cs, Coastal Communities Cultural Center, Inc. And years ago, the Urban Renewal Agency sponsored and funded a number of planning meetings that led to a feasibility study for an arts center. That was in 2000. 18 years ago now. And through the continued interest by the City of Lincoln City and members of the community to promote arts and culture in Lincoln City, in 2005, the agency purchased the D-Lake School Building from the Lincoln County School District for $1.6 million and signed a lease agreement in 2006 with the 4 Cs to fulfill their cultural center plans. In 2017, as you may remember, the agency transferred ownership of the building to the city. And as part of a continued arts and culture partnership, the Lincoln City Cultural Center, Nikki Price is here, director of the Cultural Center, will present their annual update. And also want to mention there's a revised city lease with the Lincoln City Cultural Center on the council agenda under special order of business that will follow for this evening. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mayor and councilors. So it's really my pleasure to be back here before you to talk about what's been happening at the Lincoln City Cultural Center. I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly. I've enclosed an annual report in your council notes, and if you have any questions about anything I'm going to bring up tonight, please don't hesitate. So 2017 fiscal year in summary, we do calendar fiscal years. So these totals are for the calendar year 2017. In total, we were the venue for 351 events, attracting 38,249 patrons. That's a rather conservative estimate. That's all the ones that we can count physically using our door counters, ticketing, head counts, and that sort of thing. Of those 351, 55 of them were from our visual arts program. No, that's 12 shows a year, receptions, and all other gallery and visual art-oriented events. We saw 112 concerts, plays, and dance events on our stage. We also provided a venue for 48 community events, and the community events are the ones that we classify as not being exactly mission and ones that do not provide any income for us, but we do them because we are a public place that's centrally located that's nice for community gathering. 61 of those programs were targeted for youth 18 and under, and 72 were free or by donation. A quick look back of 6 years in the life of our event list. It goes from 2011 up through 2017. You can see the event totals went from 142 to 351, and they've sort of plateaued right in the 350 range. And then attendance, though, has continued to increase. And I remember I was here a few years ago, and I think it was Councilor Ryan who gave me a hard time that we were doing more events, but the amount of attendance was not rising at the same level, and he said that we needed to get our averages up. So I hope he's out there listening. We're getting our averages up. In our performing arts program, there were a lot of highlights. I know you've all been to the Cultural Center and you've seen some of the wonderful things on stage. A few of the things I'd like to mention. We expanded our Festival of Illusions in spring 2017 from just being the Oregon spring break to also the Southwest Washington, Idaho spring break. So that whole program is family friendly, weatherproof, and it's a great boost for local tourism. And we hope that crossover will allow for a little bit more attraction for people from Southwest Washington, Vancouver, and beyond. We also joined forces with Theatre West, and they produced 2 plays at the Cultural Center last year, and we're very happy with that. In particular, Calendar Girls in October and November had several sold-out crowds in the 90s, which is greater than their capacity in their theater. So we feel like that's a really wonderful partnership that will continue in the next season. We continue to offer Missoula Children's Theater last summer, and we produced our 4th Sound of Nature, Sound of Art, which is a combination of visual art production and performing arts, classical music, environmental education. It also involves TAF 712, and as well as audience participation art. So it sounds like a whole lot, but it's really fun, and it's a way to sort of experiencing one art form while watching another. In our visual arts program, we were very proud of our art shows that we produced last year. We did a variety of mediums, including textiles, mosaic, book illustration. We worked in partnership with several other organizations, including Oceana Family Literacy, and we launched our Art on the Edge studio tour. That was the first time we had done that. It was in May 2017. It was 16 artists from Depot Bay to Neskowin, and you'd pick up your map and your button. We had 200 people participating and visiting all the art studio tours. It was such a success that we're getting ready to do it again this year, and it's got double the participation from artist studios. So there's 25, and several of the studios are multiple artist locations. We think this is something that's going to be not just good for the Cultural Center, but good for the entire artist community. Just a quick brush over our youth programs. We have one designated art exhibit that's just for youth in the Chessman Gallery. Last year it was for TAF 712. We also brought in Theater Works, which is a touring children's theater production company. And last year we did Charlotte's Web, and it was seen by virtually every child K through 6 in the entire North County area, 950 students over 4 productions. And then we do ongoing indoor and outdoor classes during Festival of Illusions, during our Christmas event, and our chalk art contest. In 2017, we were also included in a wonderful capacity building project. It's led by a man named Michael Kaiser, and he used to run the Kennedy Center for the Arts. He bases it on something called the cycle, which begins with all organizations who are dedicated to art producing great art and ambitious art. And if you do that, then you are able to bring more people into your family, more donors, more supporters, and that helps you fuel greater art. It encourages you not to wait until you have a big nest egg of money or an endowment before you start to think big. So through that, we've created a 5-year artistic plan in which we have some fun and big ideas that we think Lincoln City will just love. And we're going to begin this fall with the world premiere of a tango opera. It's called Tango of the White Gardenia, and there's going to be dancers on stage and a live ensemble and opera singers. The composer's going to be here, Ethan Gans-Morse. And I think it's really going to be prestigious for Lincoln City to host the world premiere of this opera. Around the building, thankfully, the last year has not been too exciting in terms of crises or floods or breakdowns of any kind. We've been able to devote our project energies towards very constructive things. Like we redid the information center and gift shop, new paint, new fixtures, and a new layout. We have a new box office window. I hope you've seen it. That picture there is the man who did it, Evan Carver, and he really did a beautiful job on it. We had to install a new security system, so we have cameras and more security measures throughout the building, including motion sensors in the lower level and 24-hour monitoring on our camera system. And then, using money from the Economic Development Fund, we were able to, Urban Renewal last year, we were able to replace all the downstairs doors in the Cultural Center. So all the downstairs entries were rusty, malfunctioning doors, and now they all have this lovely storefront look with lots more light and functionality. Okay, so during 2017, we saw $460,000 of income. $138,000 of that comes from program income, income generated through the programs. We also have the information center contract. We do rentals both by the day and by the month. We did $26,000 in fundraising events, such as our Culture of Course Gala, and we brought in $86,000 of direct donations. Now, the unusual piece of the pie that you see there is the grants piece, and $122,000 is one of the better grant years that we've seen. And John Collier did all of our volunteer grant writing last year and was successful, more successful than we had anticipated. So we have most of that, I would say 2/3 of that, still in the bank, ready to be spent on projects that are taking place in fiscal year 2018. And here's a little breakdown of our expenses. We spend a little bit more than half on administrative and general expenses. That's all of our payroll and all of the utilities and everything it takes to keep the building running. Direct expenses are all of our artist fees, musician fees, art supplies, things that go directly into the programs. That's $123,000. And then we spend about $47,000 on repairs and projects. And here's a look at our financial position. Cash and equivalents, $203,499. And then small amounts of receivables and deposits and inventory. The capital assets line that you see there are all the improvements that we've made to the building itself that, in this way of looking at the books, show up as our assets. And then a small amount of liabilities. And to take another quick look at the cash and equivalents line, these are the buckets that we have our money in right now. We have an operating reserve of around $60,000. We see that as about 3 months of operating funds in case something were to go wrong and we needed them. We've also begun to put aside money for a maintenance reserve. We do the best that we can. Some months we were able to put in more and some less, but we have about $20,000 in there. And these are numbers as of the end of December 2017. Our Chessman Development Fund was given to us by P.J. Chessman when she in her will, so we've been holding on to that money in the hopes of putting it toward redevelopment and bigger projects. We spent some of it down, and now it's at $41,000. And then we have $80,000 in temporarily restricted unspent grants, and that's those grant funds that I was mentioning earlier. And then the snapshot that you see here shows that at the end of the year, at that particular moment, we had $2,300 in our operations account. It's a little bit better today, but this is how it looked at the end of December. Okay, so to wrap up how we do what we do, these are our 4 main staff members. We have Krista on gallery, business manager Carrie Strader, Judy Hardy, our events manager, and Beth in Information Center gift shop. We have a few people working a few hours a week in janitorial, and we also have a new marketing assistant who is on contract. That's a grant-funded position. And we also have a very solid board of directors. A few of them are here with me tonight. The new president, Greg Burton, is here, and also Dorcas Holtzapfel and Dennis Civiello. And last but not least, our volunteer counts continue to be very strong. Last year, we saw individual contributions from 104 different volunteers, giving about 6,400 hours in volunteer labor. So that's the end of my report, and I hope that we are fulfilling our promise to you and making a positive progress with our rent waiver and with all the support that the city gives us.
Any questions? No?
Mr. Mayor, just as you were talking, Nikki, I was jotting down the different ups and ups and ups, and I've quite a list here.
Ups?
including the last one, volunteer hours, have continued up. So for me, these are all the measurements that I use on, besides the art and the personal appreciation, but as far as a community plus amenity, you've gone out and have large attendance to your events. Your membership is up, paid membership, donors, the events are up, and so even branching out with the partnerships with Theater West is a nice touch. So not that you weren't on the right track, you're definitely on the right track for me. So I appreciate what you've done this last year and the annual reports that you continue to give. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Please.
I just have a comment from this past weekend, the farmers market, and then also the Migratory Bird Festival. I tried my darndest to get there. There wasn't any parking anywhere. So if we want to look for grants, perhaps parking would be a really good one. It was packed, and congratulations.
Oh.
It was really, I wish I could have been there. I tried.
Well, I can't take any credit for those things. Just having the place open and allowing it to be filled with the activities of so many different groups. Just on Saturday night, there was a huge successful fundraiser for St. James Santiago School. So there were musicians and dancers from Ghana there that everyone just went crazy for. And then we turned it all over, and then Migratory Bird Festival, and then Farmers Market, and then on Sunday afternoon, Coffee Concert, which is one of our free programs that lets people perform and lets people enjoy it, by donation. So it's an exciting weekend when things like that are happening.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Hinton, per the placard board there, I think your next meeting at Budget Committee, you could solve some of the problem with parking.
Well, something, Councilor Anderson, that's been kind of dropped, I think you and I agreed a little bit on over the years, was the idea of some more public transportation. And this would seem a good time to begin talking about that. When we have these really crowded weekends, if we had some kind of supplementary transportation system here, like we discussed the trolley and the like. So I'd like to see that explored sometime.
Well, that leads into the other topic that we have for tonight, unless anyone else has questions about the annual report. So
I do. I'm sorry.
Yes,
I wanted
sir.
to touch base just, and I want to phrase this correctly. Tell me about the demographics of who's helping you. Do you find, say when I go to the churches, it's a pretty older crowd and they're the only ones who are helping. Do you find you are touching a good spread of demographics? We bring kids up helping, middle age?
You mean in our volunteer ranks,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
in supporting in terms of money?
Let's just say yes to all those.
Well, I would say
Money's at
that,
the other end, at the
yeah,
older
I would
end,
say
yeah.
that 80% of or more of our volunteers are retired,
All right.
of retired age. Yeah, so it's an older demographic, definitely.
And is there any problem with that, or do you have enough? Is there some kind of outreach that should be done to start encouraging high schoolers to come volunteer on the weekends?
Well, we have good relationships with the city and also with corrections people who are on parole. So we sometimes get younger people who have a lot of hours that they have to serve, and they come and they spend them with us, and we really enjoy that because they're younger people and they tend to want to work all over the building and do different things and answer the phone and work in landscaping, and so that happens to
Under
us fairly
corrections?
frequently. Yeah, it's not formal, but it's
Okay.
if people have a lot of hours that they need to serve, we welcome them to come and spend it with us because we have a lot of tasks that need to be done.
Okay, well,
We
we'll
also
be
work
talking
with the
about
high
that a little later
school.
tonight.
No, but we also work with the high school if there are students who need to get their green card or want to spend some time with us, or student council work parties. Those things happen
Right, okay.
periodically.
Good.
But the day-to-day people, the people who want to spend time every Wednesday from noon to 5, that they're usually retired people.
Okay. Then I guess you're rolling into your next, no?
Yeah. So I know you have a lot on your agenda tonight, and I will try to make this as fast as I can. But they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression, and I really think that this Cultural Plaza, speaks to the heart of that idea. We all know what wonderful things are happening inside the Lincoln City Cultural Center, but when you drive up for the first time and you see the outside grounds of the Cultural Center, it doesn't really look like a cultural center. It looks like an old school, and then when you drive around to the back, it looks like a parking lot that's been not very well taken care of. And our strategic plan that the board and I put together a couple years ago identified that in order to grow as an organization, we needed to enhance the quality of experience that people have when they come to the Cultural Center. So we began work on a design to redevelop the outside grounds, and we're calling it the Cultural Plaza. That's just sort of a working title. So here are the current grounds. And this is the aerial view. You can see 101, and you can see that where the grass is and the parking lot areas. And what we seek to do is to really design this so that you can get as many parking spaces in and as much cultural activity in as you can. So along with Shapiro Didway, a landscape architect in Portland, we've created this conceptual plan. So there are a lot of really exciting parts to this plan. The first thing is that it will create a pedestrian envelope all the way around so that people can walk and enjoy and have outdoor activities. They can go out of their studios, up the stairs, and have outdoor ceramics, for example, or outdoor activities of any kind. And we can take advantage of the south exposure. So let's see if this works here. So if you see here, this is the south side of the Cultural Center, and it's the sunniest side, and it's the most pleasant to sit in at any given time. So we want to make this into a big plaza where there's going to be pieces of public art and landscaping. Then it will lead to a meandering path that will go to other seating areas and other areas of public art. Here's the west side, right outside of the most historic doors right there, and this meandering path will work its way around the side. Now we're looking at a Christmas tree area right here. That might be the area that we would gather for the Christmas tree. There's also going to be a nice sort of camouflaged loading zone right here behind the stage, and a broad area for handicap access and classes and all sorts of activities there. So then that's for 6 days a week, and then on the 7th day, this is how it would look when in the summertime. Sorry, this is how it would look when all the vendor tents are out. This plan also calls for better electrical access for all those vendors so that they can have a more successful vending experience on any side of the building, more water, more light, and more access. And right now, when someone who has like a wheelchair or is unstable on their feet, when they go across the grass, that's kind of difficult for them. This path would allow them to have ADA access every time there's a farmer's market or a vendor fair. And then last but not least, there'd be the improvements to the parking. You would see that this access here is just straight on from 101, takes you past the bus parking and to this easily laid out parking area here. It's got 113 spots. And then there's going to be better parking off of 6th Street. They will be still nose in, but it will be off of 6th Street, which is a bit of a problem right now. So we really believe that this Cultural Plaza will be a year-round attraction. You will be able to see art from blocks away. So you can see sculptures and all sorts of things happening on the lawn of the Cultural Center. So people will know that it's a cultural center, and they won't wonder if it's an old school. So here are some of the areas that we're planning to improve with this plan. Here's the south entrance and the east side. And here's a rendering of how it might look. And here's the south entrance, sort of like as if you were above Pacific Power looking down toward the south. And the south again. And this is looking from 101 toward the main entrance off on the west side. And working our way around the building. So I know that most of you had a chance to look at this during the first initial budget hearing, and I'm hoping that you've had a chance to think about it as well. What we seek today is the council's approval of this plan, your permission to continue with this design concept as we go forth. We also have requested funding from the budget committee, and we're waiting to hear on the decision there. And if we can receive permission to proceed, we expect to go forth for the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, with grant writing and a capital campaign so that we can raise the $1.6 million that we think this is going to require.
Questions, comments?
Yes. It's wonderful. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's sometimes difficult to go through there if you're unsteady on your feet, and I think it's wonderful to have a path there. And I particularly liked, and I don't know if it's part of the plan, all the uniform tents. And I think it would be great if they all were the same, and that part of the package would be to pick up your tent and here you go. And now it's all the same, you know, like kind of like Denver Airport is, you know,
yeah,
like that, and it would look really cool. I don't know if that's part of the plan. The charging station, is that still possible? I don't know if you can relocate that or not. And was there any thought to the wind protection coming from the south via landscaping? You know, I see, you know, on that plaza part on the south side, and it looks to be like that. But you know, it's really nice, and those are just thoughts that just came up. So, and I had wondered about the pre-wired for the electricity and things like that, and I think that's a wonderful idea as well. So I'm really excited, and it's like Deanna said, it was packed. I mean, it was packed, and there's so many tents. I mean, there's so many canopies there that, you know, I remember in the years past there was half as much, you know, and so it's really popular. So it's very exciting. So thank you.
Well, it is an exciting idea. The landscaping is really very tentative at this time. You know, the landscape architect has given us their ideas about what they think needs to be there, but we really plan to discuss that with the city experts who really know what's going to survive and what's going, to thrive. We want it to be as easy care as possible, and there's just really nothing like the wind whipping down that area. I think there's going to be a lot of research done before we plant anything.
Cool. Thank you.
I have a question, if I might.
Yes, sir.
The rendering shows a lot of vendors.
Mm-hmm.
What's your capacity now, and what percentage are you at, and do you have a waiting list? Like that?
Well, the farmers market is handled all by a separate association of vendors, so it's called the Lincoln City Farmers and Crafters Market, and they have anywhere between, I think the minimum to have the market is 10 vendors. I think they usually start in May with something in the neighborhood of 30, and then they get bigger and bigger. Through the summer, I would say peak is somewhere in the neighborhood of 60, 70.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, it's been a very successful organization. They really do a good job.
So you think there would be a need for that to continue onto the north side? I think that's what that rendering showed.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then this is my pet peeve here, and I'm going to say it again. We've lost the fields with this rendering for where the kids are going to play. The little sluggers and the little pee-wee football thing. And I don't know if that's a question I need to bring Jeannie up for or talk to Ron, but if we approve this tonight, that's going to disappear. And I just don't like the idea of, well, yep, it's gone. And I would like someone to give me some reassurance that the kids are going to have somewhere to play. Please, jump in.
Okay. I had a comment, but just a response to what the mayor was saying is, don't we have that Taft School area that'll be a park coming up, and isn't that a lot of ball field?
Well, if we approve this tonight, how soon will those fields disappear?
Well,
Next year, for next season?
we don't think we have a schedule yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
But the kids do, and I just want to keep that in
Yeah,
mind.
well, with all due respect, I mean, there are many other baseball and football and softball
nobody's
fields
telling
in
me where
town,
they are
and there are
who-
no other cultural centers.
Again, and I get
So
that, but
I-
nobody's telling me where they are and what's going to happen.
I feel it would be a shame, because we do love to see those kids play out there, but that field is not designed for them, and it's full of ruts. They use it because there's nothing else.
Absolutely right. That is my point.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
one
please.
because it doesn't come off very often, or very clear. My understanding is this plan, if approved and moves forward, is like a 5-year capital plan to generate the 1.5 million. So the quick answer is, about year 6 or 7, you can worry about it, a field. But the other I would put as, remember, this is the tenant, and tenants get to decide how their property is going to be used. So I would say, not to put words in this tenant's mouth, but I would agree that they've been very gracious of allowing other uses for that property. Now, if we want to take up on another, away from the cultural center topic of fields, I think you're right. We need to either help the organizations identify fields, because quite frankly, I had lunch at B'nai B'rith Camp Friday with Chamber. They have ball fields out there that could be easily used if we'd get out and ask and be friendly.
And I thank you all for these input. And Nikki, please, I want you to know I am nothing but an ardent supporter of yours from day one, okay? And I always sing your praises. And I don't want anyone to think this is an attack on what you're doing. All I'm saying is, it's there. We've been using it for years, the kids. And because people are asking me, what are we going to do? And I go, I don't know. And that's all I'm saying. It's not your responsibility, okay? It's ours to take care of it, and I get that. But I like to know these things. And
Well, to me, it's about greater good and the number of people that
Not
can
arguing
use
that.
this space. While it is fun to see the T-ball kids out there, I think that's 10 nights a year for a group of 30, and we're talking about opening up, this parking area for hundreds of people to use over and over and over again through the week, all through the year. So I feel like it's about enhancing the utilization of that space, which is
Not
really
arguing
prime property.
Right.
And it's not very efficiently used right now.
not arguing that. And
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful plan. I just want that to be something we remember.
Well, hopefully we
We
can
move
do
forward.
both.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I did have another comment, which was an idea, and it would be something maybe to partner with the city on, and it's as the landscaping plan gets kind of underway, it would be a perfect opportunity, take it or not, but a perfect opportunity to maybe have a native plant garden or treat native plants and trees and vegetation, and opportunity to make some really cool signs about what they are, and just an idea.
Well, I've been to other similar locations where different groups have adopted different parts of an outdoor plan, and something like that could happen. We could ask Rotary if they'd like to adopt an area, or the Master Gardeners adopt an area. It just depends on who's available and wants to partner.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to accept the annual update from the Lincoln City Cultural Center.
Second?
Motion and a second. Discussion? I'll save it for later. Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve consent to the land use application to allow City Cultural Center to make any and all land use site plans. That seems I'm into the conceptual approval rather than, motion sounds like it would bypass a legal process called planning department. But I think if there's a way to word it.
In the past, you've authorized parties to make applications on your property.
Okay.
This is just authorization to make an application. It's not approval.
Use application. There you go.
Everything is subject to the land use process. So the next part is basically just conceptual approval, but that too is subject to the land use process.
So I guess then to go ahead with this motion is to move to approve and invite the Lincoln City Cultural Center to make application for all land use site plan and permit applications needed to improve the D Lake School grounds as proposed.
Second.
Yeah, I would word that to consent to the land use application, not to approve it, but
Okay.
you included.
Sounds, I'll make that modification.
Approve that with the second there?
Yes, that's a second.
All right, so motion second, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.
And I
Is the
think
third?
we have one more.
And the so what's the
The
difference?
property lease, is that what you're talking about?
No. So what's the difference on this number?
The second one was technically under your code, you must consent to someone making application
Okay.
on your property. The third one is kind of what they asked for. In concept, not binding, do you agree with the proposal? Not binding, subject to land use process.
I'd make that motion to approve the concept of the Cultural Center project as proposed.
Second.
Motion is second, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, was that it?
Thank you.
All right.
Go forth.
Okay. Now, public comment and resolution, North Lincoln Sanitary Service Rate Review.
Mr. Mayor, while this is being set up, there's kind of two parts to this. The North Lincoln Sanitary will give a presentation on kind of their annual overview, and then Debbie Bridges and I will talk a little bit more on the lease itself, or the agreement itself.
So you want me to go first? Great. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I'm Tina French from North Lincoln Sanitary, and I promise I'm not going to make it a habit to be here as much as I have this year. But I think you all understand that we've had some extenuating circumstances, and I try to keep you as informed as possible on the garbage and recycling in our city. This happens to be the time of year that we do come to you with our annual rate review, and it's a little bit more involved this year than normal, so we'll just go through this and then leave some time for questions. This is who we are. We are I'm the second generation owner. We've been in business for 52 years next month. My dad was actually a city employee and bought the company in 1966. We have 20 full-time employees, one part-time employee. We have just over 3,400 residential customers in Lincoln City and just about 400 commercial customers in Lincoln City. I think hopefully by now everybody has seen this flyer. This is our new flyer outlining the changes in curbside recycling as well as the changes in our depot. And first time we've ever combined them, and it's been really positive. I think people like knowing what they can do with all their stuff, whether it's at home or bringing it into the depot. And we have outlined things that, in addition to the free drop-off items, things that come periodically change sometimes depending on markets. But for the most part, the changes have been in plastics. We can only accept bottles that are marked number 1 or number 2, which honestly about 90% of bottles are number 1 or number 2. There are a few number 5s out there. We did have to discontinue 3 through 5 plastic, which are your yogurt tubs, sour cream, lettuce containers are number 1 plastic. That's been confusing for people. So we're trying to start a campaign called Check the Neck. If it has a neck, it's most likely a recyclable plastic. The other changes in the curbside program have been in the scrap paper. We can no longer accept shredded paper in scrap paper and no longer accept milk cartons or septi packs, which are like a lot of times broth will come in those or juice boxes. So, and then over on the green side at the recycling center, we were able to add dry cell batteries back. We found a company that will accept them. And now that we have an attendant, in fact, Cooper's here with me tonight, but we're able to accept those. The reason we had to discontinue that for a little while is the lithium ion batteries, or the flat little batteries that look like a nickel. Those are $12,000 a ton to dispose of. And if any of those were mixed in with the dry cell batteries, that's how much they charged us for the whole box. And so since the recycling center at the time wasn't manned, we did have to discontinue that. But now that Cooper's there, everything goes through the covered area now. We have an attendant there to help you unload your car, answer any questions. It's been a pretty positive experience. Those are things that we accept at the recycling center for free on the blue side, in addition to our normal recycling items. The electronics program is been very successful. That's a product stewardship program that the DEQ installed. Rechargeable batteries, cell phones. We do have a program with Nike on tennis shoes, so that's been great. A cooking oil program. And then on the left side are things that we accept for a fee that is either the shredding as a service. It's not a recyclable item, but it is a service that we provide to the community. And CFL bulbs and tubes, dry cell batteries, tires, and appliances. Our diversion, we go over this every year. Our latex paint recycling has changed a little bit. We actually went up and toured the Metro Paint facility out on Swan Island, and we were a little embarrassed about our little mom and pop operation that we had with 55-gallon drums and mixers and coffee filter strainers when we saw the product that they were producing. And so I contacted the gentleman that runs Metro Paint, and I said, since all of the paint that we collect goes to you, would you be willing to ship us paint and give us paint that we can give to our customers? So that was my contention with the program in the beginning, is that Lincoln County residents had to pay the fee, but they didn't have access to the recycled paint. It's only sold in Portland. And so Metro did that for us. So when they send a truck down to pick up our oil-based paints and latex paints, they ship us pallets of paints, and we sell it for the same price as we were selling our lower quality paint. And I appreciate the effort that our crew put in. It was very labor intensive. It's very messy. And the quality, it's just really difficult. What Metro is doing up there is fantastic, and the paint is amazing. So we still have paint available to our community. E-waste has been very successful. I think pretty much everybody understands now when you have an electronic, they're called covered electronic items, that they have an extended producer responsibility on those. So meaning you can't throw them in your garbage. So people bring those in, and we get phone calls on it all the time of, can I bring this in? Should I bring it in? And so that's great. We love those kind of questions. The call to recycle is our non-rechargeable or dry cell battery recycling. That's new in the last couple months. Community partnerships, we are the collector for the 2 beach cleanups that we have every year. We volunteer that service to Solve. And then every year, we just finished our citywide cleanup. Every year, the week after the garage sale, we go throughout the entire community and pick up to 3 yards of material. This year, we had 282 people sign up. We picked up almost 40 tons of garbage, 42 tons of scrap metal, or yards, sorry, and about 300 pounds per customer. So
The number of stops was down a little bit. I think our high is right around 400, but the amount of garbage we picked up was up. So other programs, hopefully you've seen our bulky item truck running around town. A lot of people, it amazes me still to this day, people will call us up and say, yeah, do you guys have a number of anybody that can come and pick up a couch? It's like, well, we do that. And so we still get those calls, so we need to do a better job of letting people know that anything that needs to be picked up and recycled or disposed of, we will do that. And we will send people into your house if you don't have the physical ability to get it out of your house. We have every size of truck and manpower, so we want to solve those problems for our customers. 2017 numbers, all recycling excluding wood waste that we collect up at the transfer station is up 1%. So that's good. It was up more on a monthly comparison until we hit, November. But this crisis happened close enough to the end of the year that I think we may see the dip actually in 2018. Residential and recycling garbage tonnage is up 2%. And if you look at the next line down, drop boxes was up significantly from 2016. So we have to include that in the total tonnage. So whenever we see an increase in tonnage, we like to know where is it coming from. So we break all of those out. We send a report to the city every month to let the city know the trends. And I know in the past, David Hawker would, when he was doing his budget talk, would use the garbage slide to do kind of an economic forecast, and it went along with all the other points that he had, so it's always been kind of interesting. Wood waste, hopefully you remember me telling you in 2016 we lost our market at Georgia Pacific, where we used to haul all of our wood waste for hog fuel. And that was unfortunate because the only market we found takes clean wood chips only, and by clean I mean no paint, no stain, no coating of any sort, and no green waste. So Georgia Pacific was pretty good with us about as long as the majority of the load was wood, they wanted it, but we can't accept any green waste. So we did see quite a hit in our wood waste program. Our current residential and commercial participation in the curbside program continues to be really strong. It is down slightly, and I attribute almost 100% of that decrease to vacation rental properties. We've got to work harder on helping the property management companies get the word out to the tenants on how to recycle properly. And I'm hoping that it's a communication issue and not just a flippant issue, but I tend to think that it's when you're on vacation and you walk outside with a bag of garbage, whatever's closest to you, whatever you see first, if you put your hand on it, that's where that bag is going, even if it's the recycle roll cart. So most property managers just call us and ask us to remove them. So hopefully you recall me talking to you in September of 2017. We got the news about the China issue, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I've taken up a lot of your time in previous meetings talking about that, but this is the trend we have been seeing for what we're paying for recycling. And when we turn in our budget, our rate review report to you, we forecast of what we think expenses are going to do in 2018. This was a huge challenge for me because, as you can see, we went off the cliff very rapidly, and the expense was increasing exponentially. And so how do you figure out what number to put in a rate review for the entire year? And I picked June. It's the middle of the year. It's halfway through the year. We're asking for the rate increase on June 1st. I just thought it all kind of made sense. It is speculation, and I understand that. And the rate may go higher than that by June, or it may go lower than that by June. But what I did is I took the previous 6-month trend and tried to find a trend, and then I just applied that out through the rest of 2018. I'm hoping that we don't see these numbers, but I want to be prepared to, which is what my responsibility is.
May I, Mr. Mayor, may I?
Please, yes.
So just because I'm just really not understanding at all.
Oh, sure.
You are being charged per ton to drop off recyclables.
That's correct.
And are you receiving money from that company to drop off the recyclables?
We're paying them.
I understand. I understand that, to drop
Okay.
it off.
Yes.
But you're not getting any money at all, period.
No, we pay them.
So even though you're dropping off cardboard and tin and
Cardboard, no, our source-separated cardboard is outside of the commingled, but if there's cardboard in the commingled, then yes. But source-separated cardboard that we collect on our commercial routes goes to GP and is
Sure.
outside of this.
so this is not, this is residential recycling that you're talking about?
Anything that goes in the green lidded bin. So residential and commercial mixed or commingled recycling, same thing. Two different terms.
Commingled, and what's the other one?
Mixed.
They're not the same thing.
They are the same thing.
Okay. So when you take the recycling, the company takes the recycling
Yes.
per ton, that place is charging you this much money per ton, right?
Not this much money. There's a haul fee in there, trucking and
But I
so on
mean,
and so
per
forth.
ton,
But
that's
yes,
what
we
it
are writing a check to the material recovery facility when we deliver the recycling. We used to receive a check
When
up until September of 2017.
you were being paid,
We would receive, yes, a check, which is represented in the revenue.
sure.
So that's gone, and now we write a check.
All right. And the cost associated with the commercial recycling to Georgia Pacific or whatever, does it offset this at all?
It is in the revenue. It is not represented in this number, how it's represented in the revenue.
What is your incentive other than the agreement that you have to do recycling? Is there an incentive?
It's
for
the
your
law.
company that you have to provide a recycling service, right?
Yes.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Other than that, is there something for you to have a better recycling system? I mean, it's shocking that it goes from you were getting paid to now, $300. Okay, so that's where I'm just trying to really grasp.
No,
that.
it's crazy number.
So what is there that can be done to, do something with the
No,
things that can?
I see where you're
not
going.
having to take stuff. You understand? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what can we do with the things here or whatever
Mm-hmm.
this is to lower the tonnage, I guess, really,
Sure.
so that we don't get charged a 4%
Which is
increase?
what Mr. Chandler's presentation 2 weeks ago was about, of starting a reduce and reuse campaign and an education campaign, because whether you're putting it in the green lidded recycle bin or the garbage bin, it's solid waste, and it's consumption and it's use, and people feel good about when they put it in the green bin.
Sure.
But feeling good about it is also going to cost them.
And what, by comparison, is garbage per ton?
$81.50.
$81.
Yes.
And it's 3 times the amount
Almost 3 times.
to take recyclables.
Yes.
All right.
Part of the problem with recycling is it's very light. The same trailer that you load up with garbage weighs three times as much as the trailer of garbage. And when you're trucking these things, 100 miles, 200 miles round trip, that becomes an issue.
I'm going to ask about composting and glass and all that
Yeah,
stuff
great.
later on. But I'm just trying to really
No,
understand.
those are great questions, and I think you've nailed it. I think you've grasped it.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
can you, it's one thing for the law to say we have to do it.
Yep.
But there must be some kind of a minimum that's called recycling. And are we at minimum? Can we drop to minimum? Can we,
So, sure,
knowing you, I
great
think
question.
we're overdoing it here. Because of the good times.
No. We sent, the Senate bill says any city over 4,000 must provide X, and there's a menu. If you do curbside recycling, you have met your requirements. curbside recycling, and we are doing the minimum curbside recycling with our every other week program. The law actually says weekly. We applied to DEQ when we started this program and said, can we make the bin bigger and can we do it every other week? And they approved that plan. We did that for two reasons, of one Riley is going to get to. And the second reason was cost. And so if we were to drop curbside recycling, you would have to go to DEQ and say, can we drop curbside recycling? I actually asked them that question a little over a week ago and said, if my city wants to drop curbside recycling, can we do that? And the answer was no. But the law says if you didn't have curbside recycling, you could pick, I believe it's 3 other menu items. The problem with those 3 other menu items is financially, you haven't gained a lot. The expense of those 3 other items is not free. And so when you have a successful program where we have spent a lot of time educating people on how to properly recycle, and I will tell you that our community is a pretty good recyclers. We have clean recycling. When I go to our recycling transfer station and I look in the trailer or on the floor after the truck dumps, it's clean stuff. I just got back from a tour of Central and Southern California, and it's disgusting. You can't tell it's recycling.
But
sorry to any Californians in the room.
Mayor, Tina, so I'm thinking, okay, so we have the curbside. You've been limiting what can go in the curbside recycling. Can we limit it further?
Yes, you can.
And that would reduce weight. We still have curbside, but we'd reduce weight if not as much went in.
Yes.
So back to the law, so we have curbside service, but nothing can go in but newspaper.
Right. That's actually one of the things that we would probably be the first thing we would pull is scrap paper.
Well, or something, but
right.
So you limit.
Containers, tin, and aluminum are the things that are principal recyclables.
What I'm trying to do, since that's a cost item for you per ton,
yes,
put less in it and move the other stuff to garbage.
Sure.
That's all so we're allowed to do that.
I hear what you're saying, and please understand that this is just crazyville right now, all over the world. However, I think it's temporary. I don't think that we're going to see these rates forever. I've heard anywhere from 1 to 3 years, 2 to 5 years. I've heard mills are retooling. I don't think that we are going to be paying $200 a ton for recycling for the long term. I think that we may see what we put in the roll cart change. If China continues, and they have doubled down because of now the tariff fight, they have doubled down on their contamination issue and not taking scrap paper. The market for post-consumer scrap paper, which is what we all create, we are consumers. Post-consumer means the stuff that we put in our recycle roll cart. That is not a highly valuable commodity in the scrap world or the fiber world, if you want to really break it down to commodities. Containers are higher commodities, plastic containers, tin, aluminum. So if we were to pull something from the bins, it would most likely be scrap paper. And we may still get that call from our material recovery facility where we haul our recycling that says we're not taking scrap paper anymore. We've been being threatened with that since September, that's the other shoe to drop. Pulling the 3 through 5 plastics out, or in some areas 3 through 7s, wasn't a big deal. But pulling fiber out is going to be a tough pill to swallow for the community.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I hate to use you, but if your sandwich material costs you more than you can sell the sandwich, how long do you stay in business?
Not so long.
So, Tina, why are we waiting for someone else to tell us to take the paper out? I guess I'm wondering why you're not proactive. 3 to 5 years, or even 1 year, running at this rate, I'm not in business.
So I understand what you're saying, and strictly from a business standpoint, it's not a model that you want to replicate. I get that.
okay.
However, this for a lot of people, and not all people, goes beyond a business model, and it is a service that they are willing to pay for. And I will tell you, I've been speaking at every service club, every group. I spoke at the library on Tuesday night. If you ask people, would you be willing to pay $2, $3 to keep your curbside recycling? I have not heard one person say, absolutely not. That is outrageous. That's why.
But I haven't been in those sessions, and you're good. But I don't think you've told them they both go to the landfill.
No, this is not going to the landfill.
Well, it's costing us all to
Sure, but what we collect in the blue bin is still being hauled to the material recovery facility. Our material recovery facility has not hauled one load to the landfill. They have a concurrence, which we'll talk about in a minute. But as of right now, the items that we're accepting are being recycled. Now they're still going offshore, which is not my preference, and we can debate what happens to it once it gets offshore, and maybe that's what you're alluding to. But I will tell you that our material that we are collecting is going to the processor, and the processor is shipping it. Okay. Debbie and I met and talked about this projection because she had a hard time swallowing the pill, as I did, which I'm sure you do too, and she said, why do we have to project out so far? What if we use the current rate that we actually know and didn't project out so far? And I said, well, let's run the numbers and see where we come out. And using the current rate, which is the March numbers, which is the most one we have, just going down, I won't take you through all the math, but if you go to the bottom line, it's a 14-cent difference in the rate. And if we use the current rate, and the June number does happen, we would have to come back here in 2 months and ask you for a rate increase. And politically and as a customer service issue, giving somebody two rate increases in the period of 3 to 4 months is not my preference. Now, if the June numbers don't go through and this is the rate we adopt, and we get to the end of the year and we have collected too much money, then that shows up in the rates and we do a rate rollback at the end of the year. So I don't know the answer there. And like I said, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out where do you throw the dart, because it could be twice that much next month. I mean, it's not twice, but if you look at the trend, it's been 12% a month increase if you take the 6-month average, and so that's what I did. So that was one of the things that we really struggled with. The rate impact, again, is $1.78 for residential and $11.70 for commercial customer on the average. The bottom of the slide are rate increases that have been approved so far because of this. I believe all of these have been emergency rate increases because most people don't do it until July like we normally do. Everybody has gone in. Some of these took effect May 1st, the rest of them June 1st. The one that I'll point out is Ashland actually did choose to use current numbers, and they are going in and having quarterly rate increases as the recycling increases. So you can see that we're not in a different boat than anybody. And I mean, this isn't just Oregon either. It's Oregon, Washington, California. Anybody west of the Mississippi basically shipped to China. East of the Mississippi went to India and Vietnam, which is where we're going now. So here's the current rates and the proposed rate. Commercial versus residential. Compactors and drop boxes. Contamination education plan, the DEQ in their Senate Bill 263 adopted contamination education plans, and they did that actually before this whole crisis hit, which was probably honestly the best thing to come out of 263. And basically said that cities have to adopt a contamination reduction plan. And so we worked with the county and with Lincoln City. And so these are the things that we have implemented to comply with the contamination education plan. We hired October 1st. We hired a person to go out on the routes and actually physically flip lids of recycle roll carts and educate customers if they were around. If not, we left material letting them know the items that were in their recycling that shouldn't be there. We send letters out. We have always done this since 2004 when we started recycling. If there is contamination in a roll cart, we don't dump it, and we send them a letter that day letting them know what the contamination was in their roll cart. And it's a 3-strike you're out program. So if they do it 3 times, the third letter is, sorry, you just don't get it, and we're going to have to come pick up your recycle roll cart. You can come into our office and take a test, and if you pass the test, you get your recycle roll cart back. And we just think that that shows that people have a desire to do it right. We have sent many of our employees to the material recovery facility, our drivers that are out on the route, as well as our attendants at the recycling center, so they could understand why contamination is such an issue. And we have hired a full-time employee to be in our recycling center. As of January 1st, he was in there for the first 3 months just educating people on contamination, and then March 1st is when we started charging for recycling. And then we've really upped our social media presence and Facebook and Instagram. We redid our website. We've done numerous newspaper ads, radio ads. I'm on the speaking circuit. So what's next? We discontinued our quarterly newsletter because being in our industry, sending out 10,000 pieces of paper every month as an insert in a bill just rubbed me the wrong way. And especially when that piece of paper is telling people to reduce. And so, however, I think that people are really hungry for information right now. I know one of our employees today told me she was getting her hair done on Saturday, and she said the whole time was an educational session on what can be recycled and what's happening in China. And so people really want to know, which is awesome. It's a great opportunity to educate. And so I think for I don't know how long, we are going to revive our newsletter. It's going to be a quarter page, a quarter on reduce, a quarter on reuse, a quarter on recycle, and then a contamination piece to meet our contamination education reduction. We had a green team and a green school in all of our schools at one time. And because of district staff changes and so on and so forth, it's really difficult and it's very labor intensive. You have to basically redo all the work you did to get that going every year. You lose staff, and with the staff goes the program. So we would really like to get back in the schools and get a green team in each school and get them trained and try to get that so it's perpetual and just keeps getting handed down to the newer kids. We're working with the city of Lincoln City on the education program to promote reduce and reuse and then recycle. As Mr. Chandler said a few weeks ago, back in the 70s when reduce, reuse, recycle came around, the first two just went out the window, and because recycling was easy and convenient, and we are a society of convenience. Yard debris compost program. As far as volume goes of recovery, that is the low-hanging fruit. And back to why we started our recycling program as every other week, the idea was if we ever added a curbside food and yard debris program, we could do it on the alternate weeks. So you can use the same trucks to pick up food and yard debris on the off weeks that you pick up recycling. So it saves about $1 million in trucking and reduces the cost of the program. Asbestos education and surveys, that's why Lonnie's not here tonight. He is actually at an asbestos training. We received a letter from our landfill in April that said, from now on, every load of construction and demolition that you bring to our landfill, you will have to have an asbestos survey done and present that to us. And we said, whoa, time out. We don't haul full loads of construction and demolition, for one. That is all mixed at our transfer stations. For two, DEQ has not finalized the rules on that, but they're very close to doing it. But we've been knowing this is coming for 10 years, but really for the last 5 years, and there's been a lot of back and forth between industry. And unfortunately, DEQ seems to think the best gatekeepers are the transfer stations. And I disagree 100% with that, but I'm a lone voice in a room with a lot of people. I think if somebody brings me a truckload of stuff and I say, where's your asbestos survey? And they say, I don't have one. And I say, I'm sorry, I can't take your stuff. Where's that stuff going to go? I think that by the time it gets to me, it has to have been taken care of. And so we are going to be requesting to work with the planning departments. Lincoln City has historically had a demolition permit. We used to get a copy of every one of those if there was demolition being disposed of, and we would provide a bill of lading back to that customer to say, yes, it was disposed of properly. If we reinstituted that program, we could easily add in the language there that any construction prior to 2004 has to have a survey done on it to say there is no asbestos in this home, and then the demolition can go on. Obviously, if there is asbestos in the home, then there has to be an abatement done, and we are trying to get trained so that we can actually take that asbestos from the customers, because right now we're not permitted to do that. So this is a big project, and it is one that we are going to need cooperations from everybody in the county, cities, county. We're working with the county right now trying to get them to adopt a demolition permit that is blanket throughout the county. So that is that, and now we can talk about stuff.
While Debbie is coming up, I just wanted to follow up a little bit with what Tino had been talking about, and what I had presented earlier on the reduce and the reusing. As I have been talking about this, the reactions have been everywhere from you're nuts to placating, smiling at me and saying, that's a good boy, maybe you can. And all the comments that go in between that. But the thing that, and to what Councilor Anderson was talking about, when we look at the fact that we are paying for almost all of our recyclables, like Tina said, tin and other things, but the mixed recycling, we are paying for that. We are paying for our trash. Then the idea, then if you really want to save money for the city and individually, it is to reduce both trash and recyclables, because there's two variables that go into what we pay as both customers of North Lincoln Sanitary and as the city. And those variables are the cost per ton and the amount of tons. And so if the cost per ton is going up, then the variable that you have to be able to lower is the amount of tonnage that we're taking out there. So, as you know, a couple weeks ago we talked about emphasizing an education campaign on how to reduce and reuse, and Courtney Liberato and I have been putting that together, and it kind of dawned on me over the last week and a half or so, is that one form of campaign, which I think is the least effective form of campaign, is for me to send out, or even for North Lincoln Sanitary to send out here tips and hope that people take those. But rather to generate the stories of our own residents on how they have reduced trash. So I went to my wife, Elizabeth, and I said, we can't preach it if we're not practicing it. And I said, do you think we can actually reduce the amount of trash that we are generating? And that doesn't mean just put it in the recycling bin. It means actually reducing the amount we recycle and reducing the amount of the trash. And we both answered with the same answer. We don't know. But fortunately for me, my wife said, I'm willing to go along with you on that. So I've decided to use our blog, the city's blog, ronsreport.org, to begin tracking the things that my wife and I are going to be doing to reduce trash and reduce recycling, and ask others to send me the same kind of success that they are having. For example, I'll use Councilor Casper as a great example. Tonight earlier, she was telling me about her composting activities that are going on. We have heard, for example, that this kind of paper is, when it is shredded, is not recyclable. Well, it's not recyclable, but shredded, it is reusable because it is one of the things you put into a composter. Okay, so starting with tomorrow, I've already taken some actions today to do some things. I will start using the blog as a way to really begin to emphasize that the challenge for our community is not to become better recyclers, because Tina has already said we are good recyclers and we need to keep that up. But it's also how do we reduce the amount of trash and recyclables that we are generating, so that we are reducing the one variable that we can actually control. Very difficult for us to control the price of recycling, as it is very difficult for us to control the price of the fees that we pay to the landfill. The one item, the one variable that we really can reduce is the amount of trash that we generate. So that's kind of a little bit of an update. You'll see more of it as we work on this a little bit more. But in essence, I want to generate the stories of how to reduce and reuse from our own residents, and not just simply send out tips. And fortunately, my wife said she'll go on this journey with me, and we'll see how well we do. So with that, Debbie was going to talk more about the rate increase and the calculations she's had with Tina.
So every year, North Lincoln Sanitary submits financial reports and if they have a rate request, that information. And I've been reviewing that for 10 years now. And it's usually quite straightforward. You know, I look at the numbers, kind of do some independent calculations on my own and see if I come up with the same stuff. I look at the ordinance, which specifies when and how rates can be increased, and make sure that it complies with the ordinance. This year, this time it was tough. It was this request that we have now is very different than the requests that we've had in the past. There's been several years in the past where no rate increase was requested. Several times it's just a simple CPI that's allowed under the ordinance. So it's very straightforward, and we have not seen the cost increases in the past that we have seen with this one. And so you might have picked up from my staff memo, I was struggling with it a bit. But I have...
very thorough. Good.
I've spent a lot of time looking at it and spent some time with Tina talking about it, and to the point where I think at this point, I think what they're asking for, I can support. I think there's no quick fix for it, but we do need to look at longer term, perhaps solutions, or what can be done to not have this a recurring experience in our rates.
Nobody wants to live through this again.
I did a couple of points I just want to be sure you're all aware of. The way the ordinance is written is that there's a operating margin range that the franchisee we try to stay in. If that gets too out of whack, then they can do a rate adjustment to stay within that range. Shoot, I just lost my train of thought. I just totally lost my thought.
Staying within the range of the budget, and then if it's out over the budget.
I think maybe where she is going is one of the discussions that Debbie and I have been having is that it's been a while since we have updated our ordinance. It'll probably be a good time over the next several months to look at updating the ordinance. I have no idea of where that would lead us or any preconceived notions other than it's always a good time, and usually the shock of things push things forward to look at your ordinances and see if there's ways we can improve things.
That was it, the ordinance. Okay. So the ordinance actually provides for a rate change based on the current year estimate. So, we're only in May, where we'll end up, in December is it's a guess, and you do your best guess, but it's still a guess. And when things are stable, that guess can be pretty easy and pretty close. But when things are really radical like this, it's like, well, how do you know that's going to happen? What if it doesn't happen? And it can be a big thing. So that part of it made me uncomfortable too. That it's but that's how the ordinance is written, is that it's based on an estimate. So I just wanted the council to be aware of that it is based on estimates, and I think that was it. Okay. And there are, and the other item is that we talk a lot about the recycling cost increases because that is such a huge increase. There are other cost increases too, so I don't want to leave that part of it out. But I did talk about that a little bit in the staff memo. So I think those were the points I wanted to say.
And one thing that we talked about in an earlier meeting, which I thought was a great idea, and I don't know if any of you look at these reports, but when we turn in the report, we give you an actual of our business of 2017, and then we give you what we think our budget for 2018 will be, and then we break that down to Lincoln City's portion of that and show you what the adjustments would be, and if there's a rate increase needed, then that revenue gets plugged in there. And what Ron and Debbie asked for is, can you give us one of those just status quo so we know where you fall if you were just kept operating? And I think that is a great addition, and so we will be including that in the future in all the rate reviews so that you can see where we would fall without the rate increase if there is one proposed. Obviously, in the years that we haven't had a rate increase, that's what it looks like. But when there's a rate increase proposed, that revenue gets plugged in at the top, and so then it's hard to see where the rest of it falls out.
I'm going to ask a question that's probably going to be just phrased completely wrong, so reel me back in.
Sure.
What's the tipping point, and that's the wrong word because you do tipping stuff. What's the point that we need to get down to? I'm goal-oriented, and I want to say, okay, if I want to get to this level of recyclables, so we can start saying to people, hey, we need to reduce what we're sending by 25%, by 30%, by 40%, so that it doesn't affect you so much or affect the ratepayer so much. Is that a clear question or no?
I understand your question. I don't know the answer, though.
Okay.
It's almost a conceptual question that you have to make a lot of different assumptions. So I guess what you would be saying is what percentage do you have to decrease the total tons so that rates stay the same? All other things adjusting normal, but disposal and recycle tip fees not increasing.
Right. So if we're piggybacking on what Ron is doing, if we say, Ron and Liz are going to reduce by 30%, and if we get everyone in Lincoln City to do 30% less, is there a way to then say, oh, this is good, we're getting closer to not having the rate increases because we're sending less? And
Mayor, may I suggest that you allow Debbie and Tina and I to work on that, because I'm not sure I could tell you off the top of my head either.
No, I wasn't looking for a number, but I'm sure at some point I'd love to be able to start saying.
I mean, we see goals all the time from different cities and jurisdictions and from the state. The state actually mandates us to have a certain recycle recovery number every year. And we have always met and exceeded that. But then there's goals that cities set, and that I don't know that they're based off of rate stabilization necessarily, other than we want to reduce our solid waste by 25%. What are things we can do to do that? And because if you don't set a goal, you'll never make any progress. And so, and that's kind of where Senate Bill 263 with DEQ has all sorts of goals in it. And I've actually talked to DEQ about going back to the legislature and redoing those, because one of the goals in Senate Bill 263 was to increase plastic recycling by 25%. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that that's not going to happen. And the goal was by 2020. So why are we leaving a goal in there that is unattainable?
Pointless.
And anyhow, that's a challenge that they're going to have to work through.
And all punishment.
Right.
Right.
And so.
Okay, then my next question is, we have a video production facility of sorts with the VCB. They're doing culinary shows, and I think a big part of that waste is the packaging that goes into our food production for home. Is there a way to bring that on board?
That's a good idea.
That's a great idea.
There you go. That's it for the night. I'm used up.
Riley's hitting this button.
I get that way sometimes. If I may. So just one last time, the tin, the cardboard, and the things that are good for you to recycle are in that commingled thing, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Where in this, are we, I don't know, should I wait till we have a vote or something?
No, it's good.
Okay, so in that part of the, Ron's doing great, and he's just starting, and I think that's wonderful, and congratulations. But there are people that are already doing it, and if you can associate a hashtag or an Instagram or something like that,
Sure.
and say, hey, what are your tips, and would you be willing to hashtag North Lincoln Sanitary or Ron's blog, whatever, whatever it is. I mean, there are ways to engage people that are already doing it that provide, buy bulk and put it in glass jars, and don't buy plastic that's wrapped in
Right.
cardboard, and do those things. And where are we, or wherever, as far as some kind of composting, like legitimate composting, I was really inspired by the city of San Francisco of 800,000 people who have zero waste, or that's their goal of zero waste. And if you could have an every other week food waste, yard waste pickup, I understand, or I don't know what's your ability to compost, or and that's a product that you can sell. I mean, clean fills.
Well, and that's the other thing I like about a composting program is it's local.
And it's
We have
double-
absolute control over, I mean, not absolute control
Sure.
because it's not me, but it's in Corvallis. I mean, it's not in China.
Sure.
And so that is the thing I like about it. The only hurdle is the cost. And are we willing to incur that cost? And as I mentioned in the last meeting I am here to make the programs that you desire as a city go. And so
Sure.
when you come to us, or Ron comes to us and says, we would like you to explore a composting program, we will come back to you and sit here and show you a composting program.
I mean, we're paying for it. I mean, we're already paying for it. Now, I understand it would cost the containers and the setup and a separate thing, but you're already picking it up and you're already taking it somewhere.
Sure.
Already.
Right.
And so it would involve, obviously, it's multifaceted and would take
Sure.
engagement. But I mean, but then also something that would reduce your tonnage, tipping fee.
A lot.
And it would
40% by volume.
Say that again?
The state numbers are 40% of your garbage can are compost and yard debris.
Right, and so you would
By
reduce-
weight, not volume.
Right, and then you have the paper products that will soon not be able to be taken. And so, I mean, there's a lot of positives in that. And so that, I mean, with whoever's got to say, hey, could we do that? I mean, that would be wonderful.
And I can put that together and give it to Ron, and he
And
can.
then the other thing is the curbside glass. I think a lot of it, what's that hurdle?
So it's not a hurdle. And a fun little statistic, when we quit source separating recycling, we used to put glass up at the curb with our source separated truck. And when we went to commingled recycling, we had to pull glass off because it's all together, and you can't put glass in with commingled recycling. That's part of the issue with China. And so we said, okay, well, let's put it in depots. Our glass collection increased, which is crazy to me. But we actually collect more glass now than we did when we collected it at the curb. We also did not discontinue our commercial glass program. So we run a weekly commercial glass program.
So is that a lost leader? Or does glass add to the weight, add to this 3 times garbage?
Glass
dumpage
is not
fee?
included in that number.
Glass is
So-
good.
So is it good? I mean, is that add to
Glass is an
revenue, or-
expense. It does not pay for itself. It
Okay.
is an expense, but it is not that expense. And it stays in the United States and gets made into glass bottles. So glass is an inert material, so you'll have, and there are companies throughout the state that actually collect glass, but they give it to the landfills to use as roadbed in the landfills, so they don't have to mine aggregate out of gravel pits. And so, it's an ulterior use. Is it the best and highest use? We can argue that. I'm not going to argue that. but that is argued all the time. And so as far as, you know, keeping it out of the landfill because it's not something that should be in the landfill, honestly, it's a space issue. There's nothing, it's an inert material. There's nothing bad about glass in a landfill other than purely about space, and we don't have to mine silica to make new glass.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So Debbie, help me, because I'm wrestling, and Tina, with the costs, you know. I mean, it's hard for me to, first, if I'm checking my boxes, 3 times dumpage fee, tip fee for recycled material than garbage. So, you know, my first reaction is, you heard, well, let's quit recycling. So when I vote for a 9% increase in the overall garbage, I heard Debbie tell me that I'm not voting for the cost of recycling, that in essence, I can't lay it off as a city councilman saying, well, you know, we have made a conscious decision, we, the community, to recycle, and that's what it's going to cost you. I mean, is that, because what I heard Debbie say is this is recycling is part of, but not the only.
Sure. There's a whole.
Right.
Okay.
I wanted to confirm that, but I'm wrestling with the dollars and mixed with the moral aspects of taking care of Mother Earth, and find the balance and alternatives. But I guess I wouldn't be telling this whole truth if I looked at the recyclers and say it's all your fault.
To clarify, you started off by saying that we're doing this increase but not recycling, and that's not correct. The 9% does continue the recycling and to recycle everything
as is,
and
right
it's
now.
not taking any of that to the landfill. So it is still continuing
So
to
it's a
support
huge.
it.
So part of the a big part of the 9%.
A big part of it
is the cost that it's costing us.
Yes.
To recycle.
But I just wanted to clarify that it's not the only cost that's going up.
Watching the gas pump, I
Sure.
assume gas
So
prices.
I don't know if any of you have your.
I don't distribute that.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I have it in my office if you'd like to come see it.
Or I have it in my office if you'd like to, if you're out and about.
Well,
but there is a column here with all the adjustments, either up or down. So every expense we have, we sit and go over it meticulously, look at fuel prices, insurance prices. You know, obviously we have contracts for disposal that increase, and this is one, but office supply, I mean, every little paperclip, we have to forecast that.
I think you could say pretty closely if the recycling cost wasn't going up, then the COLA adjustment that is allowed under one of the subsections would probably take care of the other costs.
That helps.
So
Thank you.
in a way, you
It would
could
be
blame
close.
them.
Okay. So it is those darn recyclers.
Which you are one of those.
Okay. And then we need to, if everyone's done asking questions, we need to move on to the public comment section. And I'm just going to make a call out here for just the time. You guys don't have to leave, or I guess you could. For the public comment time, if you have anything to say or address on this issue. Seeing nobody, then public comment is closed at this time. So now we move on to
Resolution. So, Mr.
Motion.
Mayor, I'd move to approve Resolution 2018-07.
That adopts the
That adopts the 9% increase.
percent increase.
Looking for second?
I'll second it.
A little louder.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion is second. Discussion? Hearing none. Have a roll call, please.
Walke,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
and Casper.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you. I did want to make one last comment, and this is for Richard brought up in previous meeting about the charges at the recycling center. We did include those, so those are covered now through the ordinance.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely appreciate it. Okay.
14?
Yeah, yeah, we're skipping down to 14, 12, 13 is going to follow it. Okay, so council meeting scheduling conflicts. You all have that in front of you somewhere. Because, Ron, can you read that out while I search? Thank you. For some reason, my
Okay, we have Memorial Day this month, and which is falling on a normal council meeting date. And so we felt rather than just bring that one up, we would take it through the end of the year and identify the city council meetings that fall on a holiday and request that you by motion not hold those meetings. The first one is Monday, May 28th, which is Memorial Day. The second one is Monday, November 12th, 2018, well, of course, 2018, which is Veterans Day. And the third one is Monday, December 24th, which is Christmas Eve. On Memorial Day and Veterans Day, the offices are closed, and we close at a half a day on Christmas Eve.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If we can discuss this for a minute, I would agree with the Memorial Day and Christmas Eve, but Veterans Day, I mean, I'm just not sure if we don't need to have a meeting. I don't know. I'm open to it, but the other ones I agree with.
Is that a city vacation day?
It is a city holiday.
So staff would be over, that's why. Is there a way to cancel those by motion, but also include that kind of a special meeting could be held or called if there's something urgent of, time, I'm thinking of planning, land use, some kind of issue that crops up?
In all likelihood, we will be holding work meetings those months, and we can do like we did in the last meeting where we can just make it a special meeting, and so if you need to vote, you can vote on it.
Yeah, I just don't know why we need to do this, because in the past, it's been, okay, we've looked at our schedule and said, well, we've got a lot to do, we don't have a lot to do, so we just make that decision as we come upon it.
The reason is that we do advertise annually that these are our dates in which we will hold city council meetings. And so this is publicizing, getting the word out, and letting people know
that we won't have meetings.
That we will not hold meetings on a regularly scheduled meeting on those days. And that doesn't mean, like Councilor Anderson says, we can't hold another meeting at a time. But this is to follow the same pattern we're required to do each year of publishing when we're holding our meetings.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make the motion to cancel meetings on May 28th, November 11th, 12th, and December 24th, standard and regular city council meeting, with the caveat that if a time-sensitive meeting is necessary, to utilize one of our work session days in those months.
Second.
Motion second, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. And this is a dumb point, but I got to ask somebody right now, because I think I just heard you say it. Does everyone else have the same issue? You can't jump to the points from your...
Yeah, all it shows is agenda now.
Well, you can click
on it a
that,
couple
and that will
times.
expand it, but I still cannot get it to
Well,
just jump
mine's
to my
ticking down.
point. All right, this is
Oh,
taking me
there,
forever
okay.
to get from one thing to another now.
No, mine's moving.
Okay, it's just me. All right, excuse me. Appointment to Parks and Rec Board, David Jameson.
I believe we all interviewed Mr. Jameson at the time we were interviewing budget committee appointees, and I would move to appoint Mr. Jameson to the Parks and Rec Board.
I'd second that.
Motion second, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. Welcome aboard. Appointment to Parks and Rec, Laurel Barton. Whose is that?
That Laurel Barton is a new applicant, but I believe she was interviewed by, was it you, Counselor Walke?
That's what the memo says. Sorry, do you have notes from me?
I'm not remembering.
No, I had my assistant working on this one.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Well, I would recommend appointment of Laurel Barton to the Parks and Rec Board with the term ending 12/31/2020.
Oh, yes, I do remember this interview. Yes, yeah.
Thank
Yep.
you.
And apologies to Laurel.
I'd second it.
And I hardly agree. So motion and second, discussion. Hearing none. What am I saying?
All in favor?
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Wow. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Wow, did that just drop right off the cliff? Okay, now we're going to executive session, is that correct? You want to read your spiel there?
So the city council will recess from regular session and go into an executive session. So the council will meet in executive session pursuant to 192-662E, F, and H. E is negotiate real property transactions. F is consider records that are exempt from public inspection. And H is to consult with legal counsel concerning legal rights and duties with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. The council will meet in executive session. Representatives of news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave. We'll just adjourn to the other room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or say anything about the subjects during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of executive session, council will return to open session, and obviously the audience will be in the room. The subjects are property development, RFEI properties, city properties, and Building Codes Division program letter. With that, I think we need to recess.
We'll recess to the Northwest Conference Room for, what do you think, about a half hour? Richard, half hour?
I think it would take about a half an hour. And then when we get back, as Kathy's pointing out to me, we need to pick up with item
12.
13?
12.
We missed 13?
Right.
Yeah, 12 and 13.
12 and 13.
Okay. Off we go. Thanks for your patience, folks.
On record.
Thank you. Welcome back. We are back in session. We're going to pick up where we left off with 12? K-12, Development of City and Urban Renewal Area, Agency Properties.
Mr. Mayor, I've got a motion to move to authorize the city manager, staff, and consultant to enter into a exclusive agreement to negotiate with respective developers specific to the city-owned properties.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. I don't have to roll call this one, do I? Sure. Roll call, please.
Never fails. Well, first one is Walke. How about Williams?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
And Councilor Walke's coming right back in here. We have a motion and a second to approve the RFEI.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, order approving real estate, a real property lease, Lincoln City Cultural Center.
Mr. Mayor, while Allison's coming up to answer any questions, I think we are prepared to have a new lease approved between us and the Culture Center so that we can move forward.
Good evening. So this was really a team effort, so I'm happy to address any questions that you might have about the revised lease, and the Cultural Center is also here if you'd like to hear from them.
I do it because I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time remembering all the things we discussed about this other than the length of the lease. As I read, and I'm sorry, my computer's updating now. This is 25-year?
Yes, it's
I thought we talked about a lesser.
It's a 25-year lease, and every 5 years they have the option to add 5 years to the lease. So it basically stays a 25-year lease for 25 years, and then it'll reduce 20 years. So we'll give them 5 extensions, but the extensions start 5 years down the road, so they can keep tagging or adding time to the end.
I just thought we were of the opinion that that wasn't what we wanted in the length. I must be mistaken.
The
Yeah,
major,
we wanted this, the 25, a longer lease.
Okay.
At the last meeting, you asked staff to flip the rent abatement and make it abated unless you decided it wasn't abated.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
It's in there somewhere, rattling around.
I just had, I can't find my notes now. They just poof, disappeared. But I do remember that I was having a little bit of difficulty agreeing with the tenants being responsible for the sprinkler system for the fire retention, and that I think that should go with the building. I think the owner, the city, should be responsible for that. But that was the only thing that I was having trouble with.
Yes, there's an existing fire sprinkler, fire suppression system that was upgraded using some grant money from Urban Renewal, and then also, I believe, their own grant money that was obtained from outside sources. Is that right? Or was it all?
We need to up front. We can't have the discussions. Someone's got to answer that.
Yeah, Nikki, do you want to come up?
And Nikki, just introduce yourself again, please.
Nikki Price, Executive Director of the Cultural Center.
Thank you. Okay. Ask the question again.
So the fire suppression system hadn't had any upgrades in quite a while, and our relationship in the past has been that the Cultural Center is in the building and experts at what is needed in terms of capital upgrades. And so as one of the previous capital upgrades, they approached the Urban Renewal Agency, which a year ago was the owner, and requested that they have some money granted to them to make upgrades to the system. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the most recent upgrades that were done were all done with URA capital grants. the ongoing maintenance and repairs along the way, which amounts to several $1,000s over the last 5 years, have been out of our maintenance budget.
I'm thinking I'm agreeing with you.
Yay.
And just for reference, because I always like to go back to the lease, it's landlord responsibilities. It's packet page 95, 5.2.2.B. And it's a list of the things that the landlord is responsible for, and the idea is to insert, the fire suppression system. I might add, because I had the same question, I found it peculiar that the landlord in this lease, pays for fire and casualty insurance, which I agree with.
Yes.
But I would think if they're going to pay for fire insurance, you'd want your fire system to be to your
Yeah, I don't want my
work
tenant,
week.
I don't want my tenant.
I don't want
to
my
pay-
tenant
yeah,
playing with it, right.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I mean, just to find another rationale that I'm all, as well, if we're going to talk about that, also with this capital plan, including the parking lot surfaces or future capital expenditures like that, we're talking about approval by the landlord, which I think is correct, and then making sure that stays to our standard, our being the landlord. So I'm saying yes to adding both to that list that the landlord would be responsible for.
Mr. Mayor? Go ahead.
Could I just a formality question, because I've got a bunch of these. So I wonder how we capture these one at a time through the lease, vote on each one separately as they come up, or like Mr. Chandler has done for the budget, kind of capture them and then say, do you want to do this or that at the end? Because I'm going to forget about the first one after I get to the ninth one. It was my problem.
You have 9 of them? Yikes. Put a real estate guy in it. Okay.
I am keeping track if you want to go that route and vote on them individually and then vote on the agreement as amended.
Well, when you say vote, you just want to consent, or?
Well, yeah, consent
Yeah.
and then capture them at the end, one big motion or something, if that's
Works for me.
all right. I don't know if that's the best way, but I need some way to, because I hate to think that you're going to agree with all of our, whatever we throw out. It's 9:13,
Yes,
past
it
my
is.
9 o'clock.
Yep.
Go ahead, Judy.
Yeah, I had a question about, on page 89, it talked about uses of premises, and one of them was a physical fitness center. I thought somewhere in there it talked about not being in competition with the community center. And there was concern on my part about electrical overload, if this should be a use for the community, for the cultural center. I just thought that was odd to put in a physical fitness center.
Well, it certainly is not part of our strategic plan to have a physical fitness center there, but there is some crossover between some of the activities that do take place in the dance studio or outside on the grounds that would be, classes that might qualify as physical fitness classes or business uses. I think that's why they left that in there. It's an allowed use.
So you're talking about Tai Chi and yoga versus getting on a pedaling bicycle, or?
Right. I mean, you have to keep in mind our dance studio is 24 by 28.
Well, so I didn't quite fit in my brain where that was going to
So
go.
so the overall impact of whatever takes place in there would not be extreme.
Okay, all right.
The lease actually calls out yoga, martial arts, dance, and aerobic classes are permitted, notwithstanding competition with programs offered by the community center. So the idea was they're classes, they're educational.
And we read that notwithstanding to mean that our classes could take place in addition to those at the community center.
Anderson?
Okay. If you want to go to page 82, which is 1.4, leased premise, this has to do with the tenant shall be solely responsible for addressing parking and circulation conflicts with the adjoining Pacific Power. Again, I just question, as a landlord, I don't know that I want to leave this up to the tenant to sole responsibility. I'd be very concerned with, my parking lot once and if the cultural center ever left, and any kind of arrangements. So if nothing else, something that says together that, tenant and landlord will work together in resolving or finding.
So the concern is if there's a conflict, we've got people parking in their lot, they got people parking in our lot.
I don't know what the conflict is, but, I don't think I want it, if it's going to be long-term or anything that might impact us as a landlord, our property, our future property.
But they couldn't agree to bind us to anything, so any
I don't know,
gentleman's agreement, for lack of a better word, would.
Yeah, it just seems.
Because I run into it all the time. It's like, we've got 3 buildings sharing one lot, and you kind of have this agreement that says, look, that's your side, this is my side, but I don't have any authority as a tenant to enforce it.
So would it be helpful to have the landlord standing with you?
It would be more helpful if it had been delineated by the landlord, yes.
I guess that's what I'm suggesting, is, but,
I agree.
that we add the landlord to this equation rather than just leaving it up to the tenant. That would be all.
That one stood out for me, too.
I understand what you're after, and I don't have a big problem one way or the other. It all seems fine to me. It's just, again, I couldn't bind any of my neighbors to anything, and I couldn't bind my landlord to anything. And no matter what I agreed to, it would still be up to the landlord, to the property owner.
And I'm okay on one after I read some more. That was the renewals, and some new wording was inserted. Let me keep going here. If you go to page 95, and that's on lawn maintenance 5.2.1, this is where a tenant shall not permit any vehicle traffic on the lawn west of the building and tree line. Only landlord may authorize the vehicles on the west side, west lawn, and only for special events. And so I'm assuming that's like car events or anything else it would have, or so I guess in looking at the plan of this draft, I didn't know where the west. I know where west of the building is, and the tree line.
Well, we weren't using the proposed plan. We're using the site as it is now.
And that was the ones that go along, just extend out north of the, built along the parallel.
Yeah, the trees run out now pretty much parallel, or extend from the building, and so in front of that, no parking unless, I mean, I think the placing of a holiday
Christmas tree
or something like that would be one of those circumstances where a vehicle might be allowed there, maybe for a special event in the car show, but with the caveat that the tenant's going to have to, repair anything that's damaged. So.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Do vendors at the market take their vehicles out there on the grass?
No, 2 years ago, the market and the cultural center got together to create a plan so that the vendors do not drive across the really nice grass on the west side. When they load and unload, they use the sidewalk, and then they also use that north lawn, which is to the east of the current tree line. So that's where vendor parking and vendor loading and unloading takes place.
That brings up my question, I get questions about all the time, is vendor parking on a sidewalk, on a right-of-way, and what does that do for ADA access? And what liability do we bear for allowing that? I'm looking at you, Mr. Apicella.
We're not allowing it.
Yeah, I mean, in here it says without landlord permission and/or special event permit, so.
We're not, you basically are not supposed to park somewhere that's not an authorized parking space. And the north grassed area apparently is needed for vendor parking associated with the farmers markets, but that doesn't mean go ahead and park on sidewalks and block ADA access.
It's for a short period of time when they load and unload.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that we're trying to address with this new plan. It's clearly not ideal.
Yeah.
Nikki, just a question on the car show, is that a special permit anyway? Do you go through the city for a special permit?
Yes.
So that would, okay, so no change then on that without, and we took care of the other items. If you go to page 97 and alterations by tenant, it just seemed nor shall any wall or floor covering therein, nor install or remove landscaping, plant materials, or hardscape without obtaining landlord's prior written consent. But yet, all the landscaping and stuff, plants and stuff, are the responsibility of the tenant. So the way I read this is the landlord gets to tell you whether you can plant bulbs or petunias or whatever. So and what color of paint to paint your walls, it sounds like. I would hope Mr. Chandler would have more to do than, review this.
Well, it could be
I
delegated.
know you delegate, but.
It could be delegated, but think of it from this standpoint. If this was a home that you were renting, would you want to allow a tenant to paint the walls without having your approval?
Except I thought I saw it here that if it ever is they leave, they return it to state. So
that could be
the
required.
purple wall goes back to beige, in theory.
In theory.
In theory. But when I read this, I see we rely on the tenant for such big things and sharing. It's kind of that heartburn I've had all along that we seem to be picking on some little stuff that I'd rather just trust them. And I know families dealing stuff isn't always good, but I'm looking for opportunities. That's one where I would say I would give them the latitude. The last one, it appears I have.
Counselor, before you went on, give them the last two. I'm not sure I understood what you.
Latitude.
Oh, the latitude. Okay.
Yeah, 6.2.
Can I just mention with the landscape and the hardscape, the reason for that is because often those are parts of site plan review and approval. And so if there's someone, 35 years from now when we're all sitting in Hawaii enjoying a cold drink, decide to remove some hardscape material or decide to remove some trees or something that was part of an approved site plan, that could be a problem. So I think the landscaping and hardscape is really in relation to ties that are with site plan.
If we could put that provisions in, then I would be comfortable. The way this reads, I wouldn't, as you saw, I didn't read it that way.
Okay.
My concern on these things is, as a landlord, is will my property be changed to such an extent that it's no longer economically viable in as many ways as it was before? I have a 4 walls and a roof, and I know what I can do with that, and the surrounding property, I know what I can do with that now. But if it gets changed so radically and there's giant trees planted everywhere, and then I'm gonna have to bear that expense to bring it back to a place where someone else might want it besides your specific use. And I can see a little bit of control needed in that, but again, I'm assuming you're going to make great improvements to a property, make it even more valuable to the city. So I'm not going to push too hard on that.
Well, I'd like to, I'm assuming that too, but I'm cautious enough that if we want to slip wording in that says.
It references site plan approval.
Site plan or something like that, I'm sure that. The last one I have is on the page 105, which is the termination without default. We on this council have had, a lot of discussion when it comes to housing rents and stuff about, landlord no fault evictions. So that was the first thing that kind of concerned me here, that this could be interpreted as that, a no-fault eviction. However, we've added reference now, which I like, which my interpretation is if Budget Committee doesn't fund, then, that's life, so to speak. But with 180 days notice and all that kind of stuff. I just, again, and my understanding is that something has to be there to reference the year-to-year budget process, because we as a council can't obligate somebody in the future forever, councils, without budget constraints. So that's my understanding of why that termination, or why that reason is there. I'm still wrestling with it as to what might be, if any, wording to soften the blow, because I don't want this to be interpreted, 25 plus 25 year lease, but could be gone in 180 days. And I don't know if this wording does it by itself, but I know this was the attempt and desire behind it.
Usually, non-appropriation clauses don't have any 180-day notice provisions. Just says we can terminate for non-appropriation. 180 was on top of what normally we would do, and we usually would have a non-appropriation clause if something goes over
Right,
budget
I think
years.
we're in deference to their grant writing and the
so
like.
we gave them lead time in
Yeah.
addition, in the non-appropriation clause. So
Pleasure, Councilor.
Well, I guess I'm just envisioning then that would be the pressure back to budget committees and councils if for some reason they in the future chose to discontinue what are we calling these attractions in Lincoln City, whether it's the community center or the cultural center, the glass studio, that kind of stuff, and take that stuff out of the budget for some catastrophe. I guess it's back to pressure of priorities. I don't have an answer other than I guess we have to live with this, see how it plays, because I sure don't want to lose a partner in the grant world to help us, because that's the way the lease reads, is the tenant will assist us in some of this funding for capital expenses, which I want to keep that door wide open. So I guess I have to leave it the way it is, though that is a big red flag for me of, future modification or something like that.
The end of the list?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've lost track of.
Wait.
I've got 6
Well, no,
items
it's
we've
10.
discussed so far.
And we agreed to all 6?
I'm
We're
gonna
looking
go
for
back through
consent.
those
Okay, we'll get back
with
okay.
you.
All right, Councilman
I just wanted to go back to landscaping on page 97, 6.2.2. It says landscaping, there's a typo in there on the second line, but anyway, it says landscaping shall be installed and maintained in accordance with, I think it means approved site plans and approvals. So I'm just asking Councilor Anderson, does that get at the?
Help me find that
Okay.
again, where the site plan is there?
On page.
6.2.2.
Yeah. on
6
pa-
point what? 2?
6.2.
Yeah, I'm there. Alterations by tenant?
No.
Oh. 622. Oh, excuse me. Landscaping shall be installed and maintained in accordance with.
Approved.
Oh, yep.
Be approved.
Does that help with your other?
That seems like the wording that would,
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't get at the hardscape and the other half of that consideration, but.
so. And removed, I guess. I don't know.
So if we add it to where you suggested before, then it would be in there twice. I'm just asking the question, do we need it in there twice, or is
I
this
don't
good for
think
the
so with it
landscaping?
here,
But it
'cause
doesn't do the hardscape.
It does review or indicate the site plan, and I think that was a good catch on Allison's part, so thank you. So we're down to 5. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just have one clarification on page 98. Under insurance, it talks about, I want to make sure there's enough money there, $2 million or such higher amount is published in the state court administrator. I don't know what that means.
Every year, the state court administrator publishes the tort claim limits. A couple years back, maybe it was 5 years now, the legislature said, okay, we're going to start creeping up the tort claim limits. So that's just the index that is.
So the amount may go higher?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not 2 million, it's like 1.8 something now or something like that. But it's creeping up, so.
Okay, that's what I
They
wanted.
usually issue policies in, 2 million, 1 million, not 1,800,000, 67 cents or whatever.
Okay.
Okay, is that it, folks? Okay, Ron?
Okay, so what you're looking at is to try to obtain consent on these so that you can then vote for the final lease as amended. So the first item is on pages 95 and 96, item number 522B, landlord's responsibility, and that would be to add fire suppression to that list. And then make any, when I say that, it'll make any other changes that may be affected throughout it by adding that.
A fine point, we're talking about what's the word?
Fire suppression sprinkler system.
Right, but not fire extinguishers. I'm assuming that's going to be the tenant's responsibility to maintain that, according to the fire marshal.
Okay.
Yeah. And provide proof to the city that it's being done.
And what about the future capital improvements? Does that get added
I
later, or?
I heard you say that if in fact they build something to city standard, like a new parking lot, would we then take over maintenance after they've done it? Is that your question? Yeah. I think we can add that later if they make the improvements.
Okay.
Accept responsibility, so I don't think we'd have to anticipate here what's going to be done, but if they do make changes, then obviously if it's built to city standards, it can come to the city side of the table.
Yeah, because as I was looking at the plans, I was trying to picture our guys having to mow that lawn around all those circles and all the sidewalks, and, you know, are we adding another hour of our time to these things? And dumb question, not gonna inject it here, but something that came to mind.
So that's the first item that we had on this. And as I mentioned, when I say add it to the list, if there's any conflicts in other paragraphs, then we would have to correct those conflicts.
So was there a head nod on that? Do you have consensus on fire suppression?
Yes.
The next item that came up was on page 89. This was under permitted uses, and the discussion was on whether to keep or remove the physical fitness from the list of uses. So if you'll do a head nod or a head no on removing that from the list of permitted uses.
I would say leave it because it's identified in text that what that type of physical fitness stuff.
It's fine as is, right?
Yep.
So no change on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. The next is on page 82. And that is under, I think it's section 1.4 that you mentioned, Counselor. I didn't get that one, this section, but it was to eliminate the provision that it is the tenant's sole responsibility to work out the parking issues and replace it with the city and the tenant will work together to resolve the parking issues.
Parking and circulation conflicts.
Parking and circulation, okay. So am I getting a consensus on that, Mayor? That, yeah. The next one we discussed was page 95 under lawn maintenance, and there was no change to that. In the end of the discussion, there was, I got that there was no change.
Right.
Okay, the next one is on page 97, item number 6.2. We first discussed operation by tenants to give them the latitude to make changes without requiring approval of landlord. Allison expressed concern about that unless it would violate the site plan approval. Then we jumped to item 6.22, which is that may take care of at least the landscaping portion of the discussion. So in other words, in this case, it's still allowing them the latitude to make the changes, both in the, to make the changes. Section 6.22 would govern anything that has site plan approval. That's limited to landscaping under that provision, so when we talk about the hardscape, you would want to add something about that unless it's a, if it's a site plan approval, it would not, they'd be subject to city approval.
Well, I guess what I would want is remove the city oversight of color of walls and flooring covering.
Okay, unless, now here's the question I have. I got that part, but it's unless it is part of a site plan approval.
Correct.
The only part that deals with site plan approval right now is landscaping.
Oh, I see.
So we would want to add something that goes beyond landscaping, correct?
Yes.
The hardscape, right?
That's what you were trying to tell me, huh, Deanna?
Trying. Still trying.
Mayor, am I getting a yes on that one? The next item we discussed was page 105, section 14.7. In the end, I heard that no changes are proposed on that, so that's leaving it as is. And then the last item we discussed was a clarification under Article 9 for insurance, and I have that no change is needed on that one. Okay. Kathy, did I miss anything? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, would you take the motion then to approve the amended lease submitted this night for the Cultural Center?
Second?
Motion and a second, discussion. I guess nothing I didn't hear was from Nikki.
What's that?
Are you good with these, with our changes and our discussions?
Well, I think that hits most of what we would like to see in the lease overall. I was interested in the discussion about the wall and floor coverings. That's still something that we would like to see amended. But other than that, I think we are okay with the changes as suggested.
Yeah,
We didn't
We did,
fix it.
we did amend that.
I don't think Ron got it.
Oh.
Agreed to.
Thanks for catching
That was
think
section
you removed-
6.2.
Yeah?
I think you
But
removed
no.
the stuff that's not related to a site plan, which was floor and wall coverings.
Right,
That doesn't go under the city scrutiny.
right,
Right.
unless
Allow
it,
them to do
unless it is, unless it's part of a site plan
Right.
approval.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're good.
Yeah, I
So
think
we
I got
did.
that.
So we took care.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Any further discussion?
Your Honor, just for clarity, leases have to be approved by order or ordinance of the council, so we'll need to get an order number for this, and I don't think I put an order number on here, just, that's just state law. So, I don't want to do an ordinance, so I'm just saying, we'll
So
need
can
to
we
add.
continue to vote on
yeah,
that tonight?
We'll just need an order number from the clerk to put on this.
But it won't change if we do tonight. Okay, so, no further discussion? Roll call, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Walke,
Yes.
and Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank
For
you.
your patience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could we put all our birth dates on this for the counselor's order number? You know, just make it really long?
Oh, no.
I don't think I even understood what you just asked.
He wants a number.
Oh, I get it. Okay,
18
okay,
dash
got it,
something.
okay. All right, thank you.
Number ordinance?
Yeah. Yeah, we can use some code name.
I don't want to do a code.
All right, let's move along here. City manager, city attorney reports, community service.
So, Mr. Mayor, we have this one item on my report. You had asked us to come back with some discussion and recommendation on court-ordered community service. It's 20 minutes to 10. Our presentation is not long, but I don't know how much discussion you want to have with this. So if you want us to proceed, we will. If you want us to delay this until another meeting, we're happy to do that as well.
Poor Colleen. What do you want, Colleen? What do you want?
I'd like to, I don't, whatever
Let's
you,
get it over to
whatever
it.
your pleasure is.
Well, okay, you're being kind. All right, proceed.
I'm going to give an overview, and then Colleen can finish the details of this, or fill in the details. So essentially, you asked us to look at court-ordered community service. I had assigned several employees to look at that. They were headed up by Colleen, our HR director, and there were several things that came out of this. One is that the judge is not free to require court order service for all fines. There is a minimum amount of fines that have to be levied, and he doesn't have that discretion. Above and beyond that, he would have some. The court cannot create an employee situation, and so oversight would have to be done by the city, the city staff. So we looked at what is necessary to create that for supervision. This would vary depending upon the amount. And the more there is, the more supervision that would be required. So we looked at what would be the individuals that employees that would be necessary if you did a part-time employee. Based upon our wage scales, the compensation, this would be total compensation, so this includes all benefits, would be $52,000 per year. If you look at full-time compensation, again, this is with all benefits, it would be $84,000 $1,650 a year. Workers' compensation would also be an amount we would have to pay. If you look at 2,080 hours, which is the equivalent of one full-time employee, it would be about $20,000. Transporting of vehicles, if we needed to buy a new vehicle, it would be $25,000 amortized over a 10-year period, would be $2,500 per year. And then the operating cost of the van would again vary depending upon the amount of work that would need to be done. There is not an offsetting revenue associated with this. The only offsetting revenue that you may have had would be, of course, the courts, but this is in place of the revenue that would come from the court. As the staff looked at these at these costs associated with it, their recommendation to me, and I concur, was that this would not be something we would recommend to you that we jump into. However, there is another option that we have not really begun to explore that may be available to us, and that would be working with community service groups that might be able to participate in this with us. We do know that the court already does some community service, and those are operated through non-city organizations, correct? So do you want to fill in any blanks that I've missed?
Just, yeah, I often get phone calls from people who have community service ordered, and I typically refer them to the Cultural Center or to the food bank as two places that I know of in the community that are always looking for volunteers or community people that have community service to do. I don't get that many phone calls for that. It's maybe half a dozen a year, if that. So I don't know how much our municipal judge orders of community service, but like Mr. Chandler said, he's required by law to impose a minimum fee, or what do you call it? Fine, thank you. Sorry, it's getting late. So, in my view, it kind of defeats the purpose of what Councilor Hinton was looking to do, is a way for people who maybe didn't have the ability to pay the fine to work that off, but really that's not a doable thing. And so, based on the cost of what it would be to have someone to coordinate all of that, and to me it's just not a cost-effective thing. I mean, a great idea, but for the city, I just don't think it's a very cost-effective, and current staff does not have the ability to take on those additional duties.
Yes, please.
I'd just like to thank you, Colleen, and everyone else who participated in this discussion in trying to find a way. The other half of that was that we have a stack, I haven't seen them, but a stack of citations, tickets that aren't getting paid, and it was another way too of helping the city with that number. So anyway, I'm disappointed in the outcome, but I accept it, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for staying so late. So I guess
Kind of
we
had a
don't
boss
need to
that
do
told me I
anything
had to.
unless somebody wanted to make a motion to proceed, or, no? Okay, letting it die.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
go home, get some sleep.
And just real quick, Councilor Casper had asked Jeannie a question about the cleanup crews. You had posed her a question about other areas in the state of Oregon that have cleanup crews. And she said it's like the SOLVE program, and what they call it is the Clean and Safe Park Cleanup. She just left me the note because she wanted to go home.
You can also hire convicts to come work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, you get into the
No,
issues
no.
of someone monitoring them and them not doing a very good job. And
Okay. Mr. Chandler, anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Apicello?
Nothing, except if you have anything from executive session you want to make any motions on, which is the next item on the agenda.
Didn't we do that? We did that on item 12.
You're
No.
right.
Yeah? Okay. All right, then, nothing. No additional comments from citizens present on non-agenda items? Seeing no one come forward, announcements or comments by city council?
I do.
Yes, please, Councilor Casper.
I noticed a flashing light as you come upon the southwest 32nd stoplight going north, and I think by visually it's really slowing down traffic, and it's been very effective. So however you got that up there, Mr. Chandler, thank you.
Well, we can give most of that credit to Councilor Anderson. We had reached a stopping point, and he stepped in to help us, and you're right, it's much more effective. Not only the flashing light, but the sign has also been moved to the south farther,
Yeah,
so it gives more.
It helps, it helps. And the second thing was, I recently visited a city very similar to ours in size, in the same high school. And what the high school students have done, in May, they have like community days like we do. But in May, all the high school students take one day and they do something called Community Unity. And all the kids are assigned some job in the city, picking up trash, painting garbage, whatever it is, something related to the parks and recs. And the teacher is assigned to each group, so they're supervised. And they do this from like 8 to 12. And then from 12 to 3, they have a big picnic, barbecue, in the public park. And I thought that was a very interesting way to engage students and appreciate things that are available to them in parks. So I'm just passing along that idea.
Anyone else? Two things, just a reminder, last night began the police, thank you, Police Appreciation Week, and they've been passing out blue light bulbs to put out in your front yard or wherever, and I believe, oh my gosh, it's so late, Oscar's way. Sam Escalante, I don't have her number, but she has more bulbs available, and I'm sure we can. Oh, and we have more bulbs here at the office. Okay, I have one, and I'm good to go. And then I have one question. It doesn't have to be answered tonight, Ron, but I have heard, my wife came to me and said, you guys passed something about fees for public records requests. She came in and looking for a certificate of occupancy for a house that she's selling through a builder, and they weren't able to give it to her without a public records request. And apparently this is something that's regularly asked for by builders, lenders, and things like that, and it was given regularly to them. And I don't know if that's something we can discuss later to see if it's an unintended consequence of we don't want to slow down the process of building and finishing those things. That, everything else good? May God bless you all. May God bless Lincoln City. We are adjourned.
Before 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Well, actually, it's because of all these ODOT meetings.
Mics are off.